Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the second edition of Enterprise Innovation Challenge ESG Forum. My name is Sadhika and I'm a consultant and subject matter expert on sustainability with AtQuest Sustainable Solutions, and I'll help comparing today's event. It's my privilege to take forward the session's proceedings from Sanjeev sir, who has already set the bar higher with an impeccable opening session. Dear audience, as we all know, sustainability has today become mainstream, unlike the yesteryears where it just used to be a fancy term. Gauging its tremendous potential, the tribe of impact investors has grown and matured over the last few years. True impact investment requires a clear articulation of metrics that matter from various perspectives: people, planet, prosperity, and profit. To bring forth this topic, let's start our first panel discussion on sustainable and impact investment in India. To discuss the prospects of sustainable investments, we have with us Mr. Shashank Randev, founder, 100x VC. Mr. Randev is working with early stage founders and second-time entrepreneurs to build the next big thing. He brings entrepreneurial and investment understanding with 15 plus years of cross-functional expertise. Let's now welcome Mr. Karthik Chandrasekhar, partner at Sangam Ventures. He helped start Sangam to find a new model that provides early stage support for climate change pioneers. Mr. Chandrasekhar is also the co-founder of LexStart, providing legal and compliance services to startups and MSMEs. Next in the panel, we have Mr. Shreyansh Singhal, AVP, Ankur Capital Fund. Mr. Singhal works with Ankur Capital, where he looks at new investment opportunities. He is passionate about deeply understanding technology breakthroughs and comes from a background of investment banking, market research, and product development. Our next panelist for the session is Mr. Shashwat Rai, Director at Avishkar Capital. Mr. Rai comes with extensive experience of working with cross-border teams, conducting business development in South and Southeast Asia, and closing negotiations for equity transactions in startups. The moderator for this panel, who will be bringing her expertise and sharing her insights on the topic, is Ms. Pamli Deka, Regional Coordinator for South Asia, Private Financing Advisory Network of PFAN. Ms. Deka has operational consulting and financial roles. At PFAM, she is working to strengthen a network of clean energy and adaptation projects while reaching out to new stakeholders who can support projects in the region. Over to you, Ms. Deka.
Thank you so much, Sadhika, and thank you, everyone. Thank you to the NASSCOM team, and thank you to the Esteem panelists for joining us today. For this very important discussion, the very basic theme of this conversation is ESG, and I hope this panel will do some justice, definitely do justice in brainstorming and also in providing an opportunity to all the audience who have joined us to provide their insights from their experience of working in this very important and very relevant space. And as we speak about it, I think this is the right time to further emphasize on the role of ESG, on the role of sustainability as we try to build back better as we come out of the pandemic. Hopefully we are coming out of the pandemic. Without taking too much time, I will directly jump into the conversations. We have around 35 to 40 minutes. So let's get started. I think what we can do is we can try to understand from our esteemed panelists an overarching question which many of us in the audience will have, which is around the basic trends and mega trends that they have been seeing in impact investing space, particularly keeping the context in mind. And also in terms of how do you think this space is going to evolve in the next decade? Because we have seen a lot of changes happening in the recent past. We have learned a lot, but essentially trying to keep what has happened and looking forward what is trying to roll out in terms of the importance of enterprises in ensuring there's a sustainable development and the ESG aspects are met. So I would like to call upon the speakers, maybe starting off with Shashank. Mr. Shashank, if you could just start off with your thoughts on this particular topic around the trends and mega trends, and what do you think is going to happen in the next 10 years?
Thanks, family, and delighted to be here. Just to give a quick background, we are an early stage fund, which is very sector agnostic, and we've done 70 investments so far. And it's not intentional that we are looking at sustainability as a segment, but we are looking at backing high growth companies. And it so happens that the trends which we are seeing, we are ending up investing in companies which are coming from these spaces, and it's a huge and wide topic. So I think key trends which are emerging, at least from our vantage point, I mean, no specialist in this field, is plant-based startups or companies, electric vehicle and any ancillary support products for the EV industry. We've done a few investments in ourselves in the same space, whether it's on the SaaS platform side of it or charging batteries. The other side is robotics and utilization of less water and human intervention in cleaning solar panels. So a lot of interesting things are happening, and I think broadly speaking, we are excited about how these themes are emerging, and we continue to look forward to backing these companies. But yes, broader trends which are coming up, and I'm still evaluating multiple opportunities, is plant-based products, and kind of leveraging their moat over there to build out products, so that we let go of meat-based products, electric vehicle, and the charging support systems. And I think and I did try doing some research on ESG, and I think Karthik made a point, very valid point. It's not a sector, it's, I think, multiple themes. And I think maybe I'm wrong, but I like to bring this over. And I think even with the pandemic coming in, the whole governance factor of large entities managing their workforce efficiently and ethically, I think those systems under the aspect of SaaS platforms, remote working softwares, and just generally building out efficient HR tech platforms to keep all employees happy and uplifted. And I think those are also important trends which we are seeing. And I think as opportunities to look after and support and get funded and fund them to take them to the next level. So these are my initial thoughts. Obviously, looking forward to the conversation.
So Shang, if you would like to add a bit more about into the kind of size of companies and the type of companies that you are looking at, maybe it'll give some more insights to the audience.
Sure. So we are an early stage fund, and we are typically the first check into our portfolio companies, and and we totally depend on folks like Shreyan's Uncle Capital to kind of come in and invest in our portfolio companies. So we are a seed fund, a discovery fund, very sector agnostic, and the likes of Sequoia, Uncle Capital, Chirate, they come in and invest. So we are typically coming in and investing at a minimal viable product or early traction. Again, these are very subjective, so really depends on sector to sector. But yeah, very early stage fund, looking at very early stage ideas and supporting them in their early journey.
Brilliant. I think that's a very good place to start, because during the last 2 years, while a lot of businesses have died, but it also has given growth to a lot of ideas. And I think the audience will really benefit from learning a bit more about the very, very early stage company investors. So moving on to, maybe I can move to Shreyansh, since you have already mentioned about Shreyansh. Shreyansh, would you like to come in and share your views about the trends that you are seeing now and going forward, and the kind of investments that you all have been doing?
Sure. Thanks a lot for sort of having me here. Giving a quick background about Uncle Capital before we sort of go deep on the trends. I think for us, it is one of the core aspects with which we make investments. For us, it is about making investments into core technologies and breakthroughs that fundamentally change the way markets operate and systems operate. And as we do that, the idea is that how can these companies and these technologies can actually bring systemic changes in the sectors that they operate. We were established with that focus and thought process in mind, and we continue to do so. In our second fund, which is a $50 million fund, we continue to deploy capital, particularly in areas that fundamentally have not been sort of, I would say, fundamentally sort of, I would say, unlocking opportunities in larger aspects in sectors like agri, in health, in fin, in energy storage, and as well as biotech space, right? So, and we feel that large opportunities are fundamentally possible today because there is new innovations, new technologies that are plausible, that have sort of gone away from a possibility of being in a valley of death to now being much more commercialization, and also seeing the light of the day in terms of being able to solve major problems in the industry, in the market as well. I think that's the thought process with which we invest. We, as Shashank just mentioned, we generally do come in at early stages. Typical check sizes range from about $0.5 million to about $1.5 million, with an idea to sort of continue to invest in the company as they go forward. But the larger thought process is that how can we support companies in those early days to be able to accelerate their growth and take them to the next level. I think that's fundamentally very important as well when it comes to early stage investing, because you're able to sort of set right metrics, right pathways, right processes that help companies adhere to the norms of the today, and going forward they can continue to sort of do that as they go forward, because that's the way capital is sort of eventually going to get positioned. And how do you sort of bring those right know-how and as well as systems in the early stages with companies. So that's the thought process with which we've sort of gone about doing. I think from a larger trend perspective, we see opportunities across sectors like agri, like health and fin, as well as in areas around a biotech and deep tech space, right? Because we see that there is potential for interesting companies to actually come out here and build a very strong platform that can actually accelerate growth and actually ensure that changes are happening. So that's the thought process with which we are sort of going ahead and continuing to make investments, and that's how we see the larger markets to operate going forward.
Thank you so much, Shreyans. Also, would you be able to give a bit more idea to our audience in terms of the kind of funding instruments that you all are looking at when you are investing?
Sure. At a larger scope, today the fund is structured in an equity fund format, so we can invest only in equity-based format. But as we go forward, we are actually exploring different types of different instruments that we can come out in the market with, that actually are helpful to take companies across all stages as well as across all different types, because equity is just one form factor of capital that can help you grow, but there are other types of instruments as well, and we are cognizant of that, and we are sort of thinking in that direction. But at this point in time, the way the fund is structured, it's an equity fund.
Thank you so much, Shreyans. I'll come back to you again. Now moving on to Shashwat from Avishkar. Avishkar has been a name that we have been hearing for a long time, and definitely Mr. Vineet Rai has been doing wonders in this sector. So Shashwat would like to hear from you about your thoughts, about Avishkar's thoughts, and about the kind of investments, the trends. Over to you, Shashwat.
Sure. Thanks for having me here. So I would probably, like to, given that we have the luxury of spending close to 2 decades in impact investing, just when this whole impact investment started, at that time there were few pockets which were attracting a significant amount of capital, and microfinance was one of the earliest models which attracted close to 2/3 of capital at one point of time, was just focused on microfinance. So the mainstream VC community always said impact investment is equal to microfinance. Everything else is just experimentation happening. But it's very heartwarming to see that over a period of time, there are varying estimates, but in India itself, the sector would have attracted close to $11 billion in capital. And in that, the ratio of financial inclusion versus non-financial inclusion is getting more and more diversified. So as we speak, all the models that are attracting large amounts of capital, agri, healthcare, education, energy, climate, all these different sectors which are attracting capital are purely because, there was this vacuum for a very long time. Many of these sectors were left out from the mainstream capital. At the same time, one thing which is very beautiful about impact investment is that the size of market issue rarely comes up. There is such a large underserved segment in India. You talk about MSMEs, you talk about retail consumers. It is a no-brainer that these people are underserved, and they require private sector entrepreneurs to come and curate unique products and services to actually serve to them. So the question was never, whether the market size is large enough or not. The question was, is the market really ready now, that now the business models can actually get created, which can serve this this segment profitably and scalable in a scalable fashion, right? So that that evolution over a period of time, and given that there have been some events like demonetization, COVID, which has led to certain degree of tech adoption by these underserved segments, and because of which a lot of models which looked ahead of their time have suddenly leapfrogged, and you can see the swath of investment which is happening in tech these days. So some of these macro events have also contributed. But today, now, if you ask us, I mean, many of us are impact investors, but the lines are getting very fuzzy because all the mainstream guys compete on the same deals with us, which is frankly brilliant. From an entrepreneur's perspective, now the myriad of options available is phenomenal. And that has always been the desire when we started. It's never good to be alone in this space of investing for a very long time. It's always good to have peers who think in a complementary way, who have a value addition of their own form. And now you can see all mainstream VCs. If you look at the past 6 odd months, the kind of agri-tech investments which are happening, these are all mainstream VCs committing significant amount of capital, because the room to grow is so high in some of these impact investment sectors that is very attractive. The second thing I wanted to highlight is that, from our perspective, we look at it through 3 lenses. One is financial inclusion, the other is agri. These are 2 large sectors, and there's something called essential services, where we basically categorize a lot of unsolved problems. So last mile delivery is an unsolved problem. Waste management is an unsolved problem. So there are a lot of interesting models coming up where very interesting companies are coming up and solving for these issues at scale. And the ambitions have also climbed up. Earlier, you would see these entrepreneurs will stick to one city. They will try to dabble with it with a limited set of audience. Now, the multi-city, multi-state ambition has come up very quickly, and that amplifies the scale potential of these business models phenomenally. So that's one part, which is the sectoral classification. The other side is actually the climate, climate becoming more a theme than a sector. It's hardly become, I mean, earlier people used to say, let's look at clean tech as a sector. Now people are saying, if there is going to be a significant, carbon emission reduction, there will be specialists required to assist corporates and startups in these endeavors. There will be, very nature-driven models which can help with objectives like carbon sequestration. So there is a whole swath of activity happening on the climate side across the industries. So it's almost becoming like a theme. So that's another big mega trend that we see evolving. And the way we see it in a decade from now, there will probably be 2 classes of investments. One will be a climate investment. One will probably be a not climate investment. Basically, it will become that large a mega trend. So those were the few areas where we have focused our attention. Just for everyone's benefit. So we are one of the few regional funds who came out of India. So for the first 15 odd years, we were only focused on India. Over the last 5-7 years, we have also done investments in South and Southeast Asia, with investments in Indonesia, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. And we will be going to Africa also very shortly. And some of these funds that we are now actually working on are actually multi-regional funds. So the ESG fund, which had a very recent announcement, that's going to be a multi-region fund. It will have a mandate to invest in Asia as well as Africa. And we will have more regional funds coming over, because the developing market problems are very similar. And many of the business models, with a minor sort of incremental kind of innovation, can actually serve multiple markets. So it's a very exciting time to be in this space, and we are very optimistic, bullish about it.
No, thanks, Shashwat. That was a very good point you brought about that. How can we leverage the experience of not just the investors, but also of the entrepreneurs who are working in the developing countries across the regions? And this is something that we also have seen in our network, in PFAN network, that, if you look at electric vehicles, there's common set of learnings across South Asia and Southeast Asia. Or if you look at biomass, for example, there's common set of learnings between India and the sub-Saharan countries, Asia, African countries. So I think the investor community coming together to discuss these issues at a regional level and also maybe at a global level is a good way to take this forward as well. And obviously, I mean, at this point of time, I think there's more money and few good projects. So the question is, how do we accelerate the growth of these few good projects so that, you know, the money is equally distributed for these commercial projects. So on that note, I would like to bring in Karthik. Karthik, sorry to keep you waiting. So would like to hear from you based on your long experience about what you have been seeing as the trends and what are the kind of investments that you are looking at this point of time and also going in forward. Karthik, sorry, you're on mute.
Thanks, Pamli. And thank you so much for all the other panelists who kind of brought together this idea of, one, supporting early stage entrepreneurs and bringing them forward, and then obviously taking them to a regional or a global stage, right? I think that's what we hope happens. So I think climate change, where we mainly focus on, is a global problem. So the first part of the trend, I think, is that if we don't solve it in the next 10 years, I think we're going to be in a lot more trouble. So I think the least cost to fix it is now. So we need to get started now. So we as a fund support early stage science and technology engineering companies that are solving for climate change. So basically working on the E of the ESG for a lot of the other corporates who are manufacturing or producing or working with consumers on lowering their carbon footprint, right? And I think the trend that we see, I think, is happening now in India, and which is pretty secular, is like you're seeing a lot more of renewables coming online. And with renewables, I think there's also this push for demand. And I think the first part, obviously, is the electrification of the transport system. So you're seeing a lot of investments in the EV space. And obviously, the next one that needs to come is storage so that they can make it all work together. And one of the things that's lagging that I'm really hoping that the folks on this forum can really look at is basically the industrial resource and energy efficiency space, where a lot of our startups work as well. So I think the overall trend, I think, is that I think everybody is getting to the point where they understand that climate change is real. Obviously, governments and individuals have other priorities, like feeding themselves and feeding the population in the case of government. So I think entrepreneurship to us feels like a great place to solve for these unmet needs, especially in the underserved population, right? So, so for us, climate change investing also kind of is about making sure that whatever we do is a just transition. So if we are working on solutions, it needs to be inclusive, or it needs to also look at parts of the population that are underserved today, right? So solutions for smallholder farmers, solutions for MSMEs that might not be in the same league as corporates in terms of adopting energy efficiency or resource efficiency solutions, right? So I think the space is building up. What we are really kind of excited about is the talent pool that's coming out of the Indian entrepreneurial ecosystem. The quality of the entrepreneurs, the kind of solutions they are building are not just for India, but for the global stage. And that's what kind of keeps us excited and on our toes on an everyday basis. So that's what I'm really excited about. I'm really hoping we get a few climate change unicorns out of India.
Definitely, Karthik. I think we all are waiting for that. The time has come to, because so far, I think in the first half of 2021, we had around 40 unicorns, 40 new unicorns entering the club. But none of them, unfortunately, came from this space. So I think we all are eagerly waiting for things to, leapfrog forward. Actually, staying with you, Karthik, maybe given that the way ESG is treated, ESG, sustainability, climate change, they are all kind of terms which are being used interchangeably. So maybe it would be good if you can throw some more light on the specifics of ESG investing and how integrating ESG into the concept of running a company or starting a company can actually help in raising funds around sustainability and climate change. So a bit more light on that would really help, and also kind of the matrices that are that matter. Yeah.
Sure. I think so. Starting with when you're looking at first climate change, so maybe I'll just try and define it. I'm not the expert, or like I'm not the person to define these things, but to us, climate change is mainly around mitigating carbon emissions, right? So that's the main metric there. The second part of it on the inclusive side is basically around adapting to the changing climate. And so there it's mainly around impacting lives which might otherwise basically be affected by climate change, right? It especially impacts the poor disproportionately. So that's the focus for climate change investing. And there, I think you can look at it from consumers, you can also look at it from industry and producers perspective, right? So that's basically the key metrics for climate change investing for most part. Now, climate change investing basically helps a lot of other industries help with the E part of it, right? The planet part of it, the environment part of it. The social and the governance is basically, I think now just kind of de facto rules of how you do business, right? Not just on the climate side, but also on how you treat your employees, how you treat your customers, how do you treat society in general, and how your leadership is also reflecting the values that you want to see in society, right? And so for us, when we actually like work with our startups, I think the focus, even at the earliest stage, on ESG is very critical, because you can't be a climate change startup but be treating your customers or employees poorly. So a lot of times the focus for us, the first bit is around trying to understand if there's diversity in the leadership teams, right? Whether it's on the boards, whether it's on the founding teams, trying to bring more diversity is, I think, the first step, just to basically get you to being a better organization, right? The second part of it is just basically putting the right policies and strategies in place. I think the person who introduced me also mentioned that I'm a co-founder of another company called LegStart, which actually provides a lot of this governance supports to startups, right? So I think that focus around early governance and setting yourself up right, hopefully when these organizations become larger, also kind of set the stage for how a good startup or a good enterprise needs to run, right? And that's basically something that needs to be across the board. I think a lot of talk around greenwashing and things about mixing ESG with climate change. I think we are in a climate change bubble, right? Just because of COP26 and all the focus around climate change. And I think that's at the end of the day a good thing. But I think the ESG part is not the same as climate change, and ESG is basically about now going forward, businesses really need to kind of understand the externalities of how they do business and need to internalize in their businesses. So for the larger, more kind of established organizations out there, I think when they think about ESG, they need to kind of step up the game in terms of how they include the costs of their environmental and social externalities into their business.
A very important point, Karthik. I think the one major challenge that at least we have seen is when you look at the startup ecosystem, and when there are like these, two people wearing all the hats and trying to do everything, for them, these aspects around ESG sometimes happen to take a backseat. So I'd just like to understand, what is your advice and guidance to startups who are actually scrambling for time, for resources, on how do they actually integrate and look at it as organically, rather than, once they raise funds, they come back to it and say that, yes, now we'll look at ESG overall.
Everything is just values driven, right? At the end of the day, when you bring in metrics and you need to track metrics is when it becomes hard. But if you drive it first by values and take baby steps in terms of building up your metrics and management capabilities, you're going to be fine, right? So if you need to change your organization's value and you're like too old to change your ways, it's going to be harder. And so what we kind of provide our organizations is a values-driven system, which they then institute, which is why I said the focus is more around building diversity in teams. Things that you need to do is more important than things that you need to adopt in a paper or like a policy which you never like implement, right? So I think the focus, as long as on the startups, is around what you can implement now, do as much as you can, and then keep building that muscle in terms of better governance, better social responsibility, making sure that you can track your environmental impacts. I think works really well.
Thank you, Karthik. I'm pretty sure some of the audience will get back to you on further guidance on this. So keeping this topic alive, I would like to move to Shashwat. So, I mean, we all know that there's an increasing importance to look at sustainability, to look at ESG components. So there are a set of challenges, but there are also opportunities which are being created. So what are you, in your mind, the key challenges and opportunities, Shashwat, that you think arise out of the way things are evolving right now, and how can enterprises cash on that? And also, maybe if you can focus a bit more on the challenges with respect to fundraising for enterprises working in this space, that would be great. Shashwat, over to you.
I think from our perspective, the way we look at it is, as Karthik mentioned, right? You have to first outline the institutionalize some kind of a ethos, right? In the organization. Do you care about these aspects or not, right? So first you have to identify the externalities that are being brought about, and some of these things, even though it looks like paperwork during the diligence phase, but unless the board is completely aligned that a startup needs to make sure that ABC are the hygiene factors. For example, on the governance side, in many cases, what we have realized, if you are reducing a cash handling risk of a startup, it makes perfect sense from a financial and economic sense also. I mean, the entrepreneur will sleep, will have a much better sleep if the traceability of the entire cash settlement process is much better in his or her system, right? So some of these hygiene factors lead to just better business practices, and they just make much more sense for the businesses to incorporate on ground on day zero. In any case, they have to do it. The world has already moved to that place, and they should also be moving to that place. Otherwise, they will be, in some sense, they will be like a dinosaur, because they are just moving in their own style, and the world has already evolved, right? So there is a bunch of that already happening. Then there are some on environment. What we realized, sometimes it's not that easy, right? So environmental compliance, if you take the local compliance versus the global compliance, sometimes a very small startup trying to shoot for a global compliance will require a significant amount of capital. But there has to be a pathway, and that is where, when the fundraise quantums are going up, the capacity of these organizations are growing up. It is no longer a play of very incremental fundraisers and meeting your 6-month kind of a timeline. People are raising significant capital these days. So building the organization right, capital requirement condition is being fulfilled more today than it was ever before, right? So if you have the capital, and if you have the capability of building the organization the right way, you're always better to do that when you are in the first, second, third year of operations. As Karthik pointed out, after 7, 8 year, 9 year vintage, if you try to shift or alter the DNA, it will be a very, very time consuming and a very less efficient process for you. And by that time, even the requirements that a late stage investor or any other stakeholder would have, they would also expect these hygiene factors to be at a very different level altogether. So you will be in a double trap situation. You won't be able to raise significant capital, neither industry participants would want to deal with you. So that's why the focus on ESG at an early stage is important, while practicality will have to be maintained in certain businesses which are, say, inherently polluting in nature. What is the adoption plan that they can make, that in a 12-month time frame or a 15-month time frame, they can actually graduate to the next level with the right amount of support from the investors, or there are technical assistance facilities, all those kind of grant channels and whatnot, to actually take a roadmap in that direction. But on the governance side, on the social side, ESG, the S and G part, the investments that they do initially in getting the right policies in place, making sure there are right systems in place, they really play play a big role in actually the scalability or the backbone of that organization. That is how we look at it. And that is why it's not just a documentary process for us that we'll just have 6-7 policies adopted at board and nobody will look at it. But it's actually something that is very critical, because if they have a lapse on that, that will have a structural deficiency that startup will be carrying going forward.
Yeah, and that is the challenge, I guess, right? And that's the thing that I would like to discuss with Shreyansh. So Shreyansh, it's not easy, right? I mean, there are so many companies which are coming up every day. So as an investor, what are the things that you would look at, and what helps you decide that, this is a company which actually believes in these things, which is passionate about these things, but believes in these things and is here to stay with these thoughts. And they are not doing these things just for greenwashing or just to take an exit after a year, right? Because companies in this space aren't ones that we see normally, the tech companies which can take an exit in 1 or 2 years and start up something new. So what are your thoughts on that, Shreyansh? Would be good to hear from you.
I think one of the key factors is the value systems, right? And the value systems with which you are not just investing, but the value systems with which the company is sort of pitching to you, right? I think those factors become important. And because we come in at early stages, sometimes so happens that a lot of these companies have no idea in terms of how they look at setting up these matrices, right? Or sort of manage these policies or be able to sort of do this, while there are clear goals and alignment in their vision to be able to do this. But it so happens that they don't have the right tools or systems in place that can help get them there, right? I think that's one of the critical aspects with which we also sort of help support most of these companies when we come in at early stages, to be able to sort of establish those right matrices, specifically on the E part, right? Which is fundamentally being able to sort of identify what are the key ways in which they need to sort of identify their criterias, which they can get recognized in the market, and how they can sort of continue to ensure that they stand by those practices on an ever-going basis, right? I think the as most of these companies start going about measuring them, there is inherent benefit, not just from capital, but just from a perspective of how they're able to do business, right? I think that starts fundamentally coming in terms of how they operate and how they sort of start looking at scaling their businesses up. Capital definitely is a standpoint with which it helps further along as they go forward with the late stage investors ideally looking for these kind of policies and setups in place. But the thing is that the key parameters with which we look at early stages is that there are value systems that we have established for ourselves internally, and there are value systems that the founders come in with, right? And are there alignments on those value systems? I think that becomes critical aspect with which you are able to sort of actually take a call in that early stages. As you go forward, I think what the key aspect is about being able to sort of ensure that the right policies, not just in terms of just as paperwork, but are also sort of actually being practiced on the ground, right? I think being able to see and see through with most of these companies in terms of how they are able to establish the right set of people, right set of systems that help them get there, right? And with most of these companies, there is different types of assistance available from the market, which sort of help them get there. So I think that becomes the critical aspect with which you are trying to sort of establish a company to be able to sort of create those impact metrics and impact lens around them, and be able to measure these ESG matrices that are required from the market as well as from by themselves, right? But it so happens that at early stages, it is also easier for you to mold a lot of these because these companies are, while they're fundamentally driven by that aspect, you're able to identify and mold these companies in that right direction, right? And I think that's one of the critical aspects with which you, as an investor, are able to help and get them there. And I think that's one of the critical roles that we play primarily with early stage investing. As late stage investing happens, I think those aspects become, as Shashwat mentioned, right, that double trap, it becomes a very critical aspect, because you are not able to sort of change systems or reinvent new innovations or new models with which you are able to measure these. Rather, at that early stages, because these get established, it's much easier for you to build on top of that and continue to sort of improve on a regular basis, right? And I think we've seen with most of our companies that they start seeing the value of that as they go forward, and as they've sort of scaled up, these parameters fundamentally help them go backward and say that this is what the company has been able to prove, not just from a capital or financial standpoint of view in terms of the scale at which they're growing, but also being able to make the change in the sectors and the market that they're operating in and establish as their core proposition for them to be able to also stand out for the larger audience. So that's how sort of we've seen, with most of our companies at that early stages.
Yeah, no, very, very interesting, very good points made. I think these are some things which have to be integrated from the very beginning. And it's interesting. I mean, the platform which today we are on, NASSCOM overall looks at the technology aspect, and technology definitely has an important role to play, not just from the hardware side of things, but also from, these essential systems, tools, applications that we are talking about, which can help the startup community to actually achieve some of these outcomes. So talking about technology, I would like to also then speak to Shashank. So Shashank is a VC. As you said, you have been working across multiple sectors. A lot of the work has been into different technology spaces as well. So I'd like to hear your thoughts about, how technology, what kind of role it plays, not just in terms of technology as tech, as in, tech for energy storage or tech for solar or wind, which is normally what people refer to as tech, but also the software elements like, the AI part of it, the IoT part of it, how these things are helping and accelerating growth in the space. And also if you could share some real world examples from your portfolio, from the what you have seen, your thoughts on this particular space.
Sure. I think the thoughts are not specifically meant for ESG, but I think overall what we are seeing, and as I said, our vantage point comes from being sector agnostic. And what we've seen overall is, I think, deeper penetration into engaging employees from distant location, right? And that thing, I think, came, and this was a function of software in many of our portfolio companies. One case in point, which I think as an example I'd like to highlight, is that, since 2016, I had personally been looking at, as we call it now, manufacturing and industry 4.0, and a lot of these connecting devices or sensor enabled devices trying to sell to the SMEs and SMBs in India, and trying to at least bring on board the traditional SMEs. And we'd evaluated a bunch of companies since 2016, but we'd never seen those companies scale. So the overall trend was that IoT enabled startups were facing severe challenges in scaling up. There were dime a dozen over there. There were home automation companies and so on and so forth. And something very interesting happened post COVID, right? And we saw a fundamental shift in at least some of the SMEs changing their traditional mindset and onboarding certain newer players, either in the form of startups or maybe established companies, bringing on board and experimenting with, let's say, a software which is enabling remote management of machines while the workers are not able to come and operate the machine, right? Or as opposed to 10 guys coming in, only 2 guys are able to kind of operate it, and the owner still requires the report, right? That fundamental shift came in, which was huge. In terms of, so there's this company which we've invested, which gave us the strength and confidence to, okay, this is here to stay and this will evolve. The second, I think, interesting trend which we saw was, during COVID, we saw a very large portion of employees suddenly working out of remote. And India is again, I'm open to being corrected, but as I've felt, is its trust deficit is large in India, right? And larger organizations don't tend to be comfortable working with employees or team members remotely because they're not able to oversee them or manage them. And I think the management of tacit knowledge and additional project information became a blocking point during the COVID pandemic. And we invested in a company called Beehive, which is managing tacit knowledge in terms of training, onboarding, and essentially, I wouldn't say you might be able to relate it to some function through the ESG, but I think overall, keeping the stress levels down on both the sides, team members as well as the team manager, and then at the end of the day, maintaining productivity, right? Because eventually, investors still looking at profitable businesses, right? So a company like this, if I have to go to, let's say, Shreyans or a Series A investor, they will still look at the balance sheet, right? The metrics still need to be looked at. So some of the companies we invested in were falling in these segments, and these are 2 examples. The another one which we kind of invested and not as I said, not particularly because, we want to go after the sustainable space. As I'm saying, and, adding to Karthik and Shashwat's and Shreyan's point, India is now at a vantage point where we're seeing a lot of good quality founders coming out. And so interestingly, so a large percentage is addressing profitable businesses in sustainability, if I may say so, right? And therefore, whatever hard work Shashwat's team has done over the last 20 years, or I remember meeting Karthik when he was at Acumen many years ago. I think all that hard work of, being in a siloed side, I think that is fundamentally changing, right? So we invested in a company which is a robotics company, and they built out a robot which was automatically cleaning solar rooftops, right? This is so our way of kind of saying, okay, fine, this might require some help. We can help them with distribution. Why not kind of help them out? Because traditionally, nobody would kind of come in and that. So that was one function of hardware, which was involving software. So there are a bunch of these examples which are there in our portfolio. And I'm seeing various other portfolios as well. And I think going forward, the dependency of software is largely being accelerated by the advent of COVID. Globally, it's been unfortunate, but I'm telling you, in my personal opinion, I think this is the best thing that happened for India, because everything came together and it just pushed us to the next level. It's just a function of how we pull up our sleeves and socks and just start working. But it's a great opportunity because the field's been leveled. We have an opportunity to start again, like many other countries, and everything seems to be in place. Cheap data, access to tier 2, tier 3, reverse migration, anything can be built out from anywhere. And the SME mindset changing towards a positive adoption of digitization. Hence, software can be pushed to a large consumption market within India. So those are my thoughts on that.
No, very, very, actually, Shashank, you have done my job to an extent in terms of wrapping up the session. And I think we have to also wrap up in 2 minutes. Very rightly say the pandemic came as a shock, but at the same time, it has created so many opportunities. So brought up so many ideas which were otherwise not acceptable. I mean, the fact about, managing knowledge, managing information, providing training, all of these things which used to happen in person. You wouldn't kind of go and interview also people. You wouldn't accept a new person in the team without actually seeing the person. But I think these are the different components which finally lead on to the, how to have better governance structures, how to ensure there is diversity in the organization. And as all the panelists have said here rightly, that these are things which have to, which the companies have to be integrating from the very beginning. You have to believe in these basic elements. And when it comes to looking for investors, you have to look at investors who are also aligned with you. So a kind of suggestion for all the enterprises who are looking at fundraising, please do go and check what kind of, not just the sectors in which the investors are involved, but also the kind of basic ethos, the basic theory of change that the investors believe in. And that will also make your life easier as much as, helping the investors in picking the right set of companies. So I think this has been a very great session. Hopefully we'll be connected going forward. The trends are obvious. I think it's about how we kind of leverage what's already there, how we connect the dots which are remaining to be connected, and how we kind of join hands as a larger community to kind of, turn around some of the issues that we have faced, to work on building back better, as the term is kind of has been coined. And going forward from here, hopefully NASSCOM will also help in some of these conversations, keeping these conversations live, and looking forward to connecting with many more enterprises and many more investors in the sector. So over to you, Satvika.
Thank you, ma'am. That was such a power-packed session, and I'm sure the audience was as enthralled as I am. It's so true that the impact investment market is very, very essential to help support organizations address today's most pressing environmental issues, and also to try and help mitigate climate change and reduce emissions in an inclusive way, involving entrepreneurs, government, and the consumers. So it's also very accurate that the ESG components must be ingrained in the values of all organizations from the ground up. So thank you for that amazing session, panelists. Moving on. With the growing urgency on climate action and sustainability, and commitments that corporate make to go net zero, the conversations on sustainability across the entire enterprise are coming to the fore. It is a known fact that emission footprints span across core operations, support functions, supply chains, and more. And so the theme of sustainability should run horizontally all the way through. In light of this, enterprises need to find ways to contextualize sustainability to various business functions and make it relevant enough to have enterprise-wide traction. Our next panel discussion for the day is centered around bringing sustainability to the fore across business functions. To bring their expertise, we have an excellent panel to enlighten us on this important topic. With a round of applause, let's call Ms. Sridevi Bale, Managing Director, Energy Lead at Accenture Technologies, who will be moderating the panel. Ms. Bale is responsible for the Energy Practice and Advanced Technology Center in India, and she's led the Charter of Innovation and Building Digital Solutions for Energy Vertical and work across the value stream from Accenture Technologies. Over to you.
Thank you, Sadvika, for the wonderful introduction. Hello, all. I hope all of you all are awake and really enjoying all the conversation. I was just listening to the previous conversation. It was indeed very insightful. I would like to start this conversation with a small anecdote, which happened about a week back. So I have a 8-year-old son, and he comes running to me and he says, Mama, my friend said Earth is having fever. And I was like, what? I thought maybe he wanted to say, my friend said Parth has fever. Parth is also one of his friend. But he said, no, Mama, it is Earth. Our planet is having fever, which is called global warming. And I was like, wow, that's a nice way to explain, right? At the same time, he said, why is such a big fuss to cure this global warming? Why can't we just give paracetamol and put some cold pads and Earth will get healed in no time, right? Of course, the wave 3 is having a lot of impact on his way of thinking and the way he sees the world. And I wish it was so simple. But while my son is not able to understand the complexity of the issue and the implication, but we all certainly do, right? Governments and businesses across the world have come together again in COP26 in Glasgow last year and have renewed their commitment to keep up with Paris. Can you see my... Oh, sorry, I didn't know that my camera was not on. Okay. So I was saying that all the companies have, government and businesses across the world have come together again in COP26, which was held in Glasgow last year, and renewed their commitments to keep up with Paris climate goal of limiting temperature rise to 2 degrees, preferably 1.5 degrees Celsius from the pre-industrial level. It's very clear and very, very palpable that intentions are very much there. But the question, what we had to see now is there enough action on the ground? Recent IEA report says that COP26 climate pledges could help limit global warming to 1.8 degrees Celsius, but implementing them will be a key. Now, that definitely means that we need to accelerate our actions. So while governments are taking bolder steps in this direction, what are our businesses doing? In a recent CEO study done by United Nations Global Compact and Accenture, across the country, CEOs are acknowledging the fact that their businesses are already experiencing the damaging effects of climate change, and they're indeed ready to take bold action. In fact, 3 out of 4 CEOs are saying that they feel increasing pressure to act, and stakeholders are demanding greater accountability and progress. And 8 in 10 CEOs are saying that they're already developing new sustainable products, services, and deploying new and circular business models. So, of course, very clearly, we can say that action towards sustainability has indeed started, and many of them have started making good progress. Leaders are indeed prioritizing climate actions. Of course, all these intentions and goals should ultimately get transformed into actions on the ground, right? It should not just remain in the boardroom. So what are some of the challenges we are facing across different sectors in transitioning these goals into actions on the ground? And of course, sustainability as an agenda cannot be just a vertical unit within the organization which is going to focus on sustainability, right? It is something which has to cut horizontally. After all, your supply chain, operations, manufacturing, everyone is a party to emit the GHG gases, right? So everybody should be responsible for sustainability, and it should be a theme which should be kind of running across the units. But the question is, how do we bring sustainability to the fore across business functions? And to discuss this and much more, Today we have our esteemed panel. I would like to start first by introducing Parag Satpute, who is Managing Director, Bridgestone India Private Limited. Parag assumed the role of Managing Director of Bridgestone India in November 2017. In his career of over 20 years, Parag has worked in the mining, automotive, construction, and general engineering domains. He has successfully handled challenging global assignments in the UK, Germany, and Sweden. Parag holds an MBA degree from Warwick Business School. He completed his bachelor's degree from University of Pune. Parag holds prominent positions and is actively involved in industry bodies such as CII and the Associated Chambers of Commerce in India and Industry of India. Welcome, Parag. It's such a privilege to be having you here in this panel today.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Sridevi, for having me on the panel.
Welcome, Parag. Thank you. Next, I'll move on to Sanjay Singh. He is the Director Operations Development, EMEA, plus North Asia Pacific at Bacardi. His key role is to profitably expand Bacardi's supply chain in EMEA and North Asia Pacific regions. He's an operations expert with over 25 years of experience in alcohol, beverages, and FMCG industries. He has played an important role in formulating the sustainability vision for Bacardi in this region. Welcome, Sanjay. It's nice to have you on the panel.
Thank you, Sridevi, and thank you, NASCOM, for having me on this panel today. Look forward to an exciting discussion.
Thank you. Next guest on this panel is Tarun Srinivasan. He is the Vice President and Leader for IoT Service Delivery and Solutioning at Genpact. He is a Global Operating Leader Analytics at Genpact. He brings in over 23 plus years of experience in analytics, supply chain, and manufacturing. He has wide range of experience of working in analytics from industrial manufacturing clients in the area of commercial, supply chain, procurement, aftermarket services, and risk management. In his current role in Genpact, he is responsible for leading a 2,000 plus strong analytics team supporting industrial manufacturing clients. His team is responsible for delivering analytics at scale by building solutions that help organizations manage end-to-end manufacturing value chain and run it on a day-to-day basis and generate tangible business impact through analytics and insights. Prior to joining Genpact, Tarun was with Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, managing manufacturing and service operations. Welcome, Tarun. Thank you for being with us today.
Hey, everyone. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Moving on, last but not the least, Deepak Bishit, Head of Strategy and Innovation and Environmental Sustainability at Novartis Technical Operations. With more than 17 years of experience, Deepak is currently leading strategy, innovation, and environment for Novartis Technical Operations. In his previous role as Group Head in Commercial Analytics Practice, he was responsible for building and leading the business analytics team to support pharma and oncology divisions. Deepak holds a master's degree in business administration and a degree in mechanical engineering. Prior to Novartis, he worked in organizations such as Johnson & Johnson, Cognizant, and HP. Deepak, welcome to the panel today.
Thank you so much, Sridevi. Looking forward for the discussion today.
Thank you. And of course, I'm Sridevi. I've already been introduced, so I'll not talk more about myself. Let's straight jump to the panel discussion. So Parag, let me start with you. You represent one of the large manufacturing companies here, right? So how does your organization see sustainability and what has been your focus area per se?
Good afternoon, everyone again. So like you might know, Bridgestone, the company that I represent, is one of the largest tire and rubber products manufacturing company in the world. But more importantly, sustainability has been at the core of our philosophy. 90 years ago, when the company was founded, our founder said that a business cannot exist just for profit. It has to support the society and the community around it. So we see a very, very clear linkage between this founding philosophy and the discussion topic today, sustainability. Being one of the largest manufacturers, we take our responsibility also very seriously, and we also intend to take the lead in this sustainable area. So we have set some very clear goals and targets across our operations. For example, we have a very clear target to reduce CO2 emissions by 50% by the year 2030. We want to increase the ratio of recycled materials that is used to produce our products, that is tires, up to 40% by 2030. And then we are working beyond our current product portfolio to drive innovations in the overall mobility space. And the focus of these innovations is around sustainability. So happy to get into these as the discussion moves on. But as a start, I would say we take this topic very, very seriously, and we have put in very clear goals and objectives across our operations.
Thank you, Parag. In fact, even Accenture's goals are almost on the same lines. We have also made have a goal of achieving net zero emissions by 2025, wherein we'll be powering all our offices using 100% renewable energies, and also to address the remaining emissions, we are looking at more nature-based carbon removal solutions. We're also planning to plant 1 tree for each of our employees, which is going to be equivalent to 675,000 trees. It's a large organization. And of course, we also have a lot of focus on recycling and moving to zero waste. So I can see a lot of similarity, though we are from a different sector, but I think the goals are almost there. It's almost matching, I would say. Thank you for sharing your views. Sanjay, what about you? You come from food and beverage industry. So what has been your sustainability goals and what's your focus area?
Yeah, so hello once again to everybody. I represent Bacardi. Bacardi, as we all know, is a multinational liquor company. It's a 160-year-old company having 200 plus brands operating in 170 countries worldwide. At Bacardi, we believe in making good spirits, but at the same time, for each and every employee, being good spirited is equally important. And when I say being good spirited, basically good spirited is the name of our sustainability vision. And this vision is actually the part of our global best end strategy. The best end strategy is a strategy that is, we had created from in the year 2020, and it will, sort of drive our business till the year 2030. And this entire strategy, which includes the good spirited strategy, is very closely monitored by our global leadership team. Under the good spirited vision, we have identified 4 core areas, right? And those 4 core areas are good futures, good footprint, good sources, and good choices. Now, what do these 4, core areas represent? So let me just elaborate. So under good futures, we empower people and bolster communities to enable future success. Under good footprint, we take bold actions to make a positive environmental impact, as part of our supply chain footprint. So, as Sridevi mentioned, one of my critical areas is to expand our supply chain footprint. So, in every expansion that we do, one of the important parameters that we evaluate is the sustainability parameter. Good sources, the third pillar that we have, it prioritizes the sustainable sourcing of all ingredients. So example, we have a sustainable farming partnership with the farmers in Ghana in Africa. And this partnership is actually for sourcing of all the botanicals for our Bombay Sapphire gin. The fourth pillar that we work on is good choices. This is the pillar under which we encourage our consumers, and consumers are at the heart of every decision that we make. We encourage our consumers on mindful drinking. So obviously, as being a multinational liquor company, we are totally aware that we have a social important role to play on mindful drinking. So those are the various pillars, Sridevi, under which we operate in sustainability.
So good future, good footprint, good sources, good choices. Yes. I think it's pretty easy and clear to remember that. Thank you so much, Sanjay, for sharing your views. Moving on, Tarun, you and me come from a similar background, and we are always seen as people, wearing, though we wear black coat, but we are seen as a white collar job sitting behind the screens and really not contributing to the carbon emissions as such, right? What's been your focus, your perspectives from Genpact, and what has been your focus in sustainability agenda as far as that is concerned?
Yeah, sure. All of you may be knowing about Genpact. We are a solution provider, managing business processes for our clients. We see sustainability at 2 levels. One, what do we do as a company? And then what do we do for our clients to meet their goals? As a company, our purpose statement itself says it all. It is relentless pursuit of a world that works better for people. Sridevi, as you mentioned, we are very much conscious and cognizant about the largest society in addition to the white collar job we are involved in. We have set very clear goals for ourselves, including 100% recycling of food wastage generated from all our facilities in the world by this year end. 20% reduction of scope 1 and 2 emissions, 25% of energy procurement from renewable sources, all by this year end, and then obviously go towards the net zero emission in 5 years. Now for our, and most importantly, we have adopted some lakes in Bangalore. Those who lived in Bangalore know that Bangalore has 800 lakes, which is now reduced to maybe half of it because of encroachment, etc. So we adopted lake. We really regenerate, and it's glad to see some of the lakes full with water and an ecosystem around it now with birds, small animals, etc. And for our clients predominantly, everybody, as Sridevi initially talked about, has a very clear, sustainability goal nowadays, driven right from the top. So we help our clients achieve the sustainability goals using technology, analytics, and process improvements. Thanks to the technology advancement we are seeing right now, I think we are better equipped to generate this impact to our clients. Thanks.
Thank you, Tarun. So it's glad to see that even you have a nature-based solution focus, just like what I was mentioning. Okay, thank you for that. Deepak, over to you. How is sustainability pursued within your organization, and what's been your focus area?
Thank you so much, Sridevi. I think I represent Novartis here. So as a leading global healthcare company with the purpose of to improve and extend people's life, I will say environment sustainability is really an essential component of our overall strategy and our operating model. We believe that the health, human health, and the planetary health are intrinsically linked, and we really cannot improve our human health without taking care of the planet. And when I say the planetary health, it's really about our people, our patients, and our planet. And we have the responsibility across all these three areas. So let me briefly talk about our people. So we really have a very inclusive approach to really bring all the 100,000 associates together on this journey. And we really want to see that how we best can harness the passion and the novelty of our associates to drive meaningful change. Whether it's about a behavioral change, for example, this year we have really eliminated all the single use of plastics from all our facilities at the workplace. Or it could be integrating sustainability in making our day-to-day business decisions. The second one, where I talk about patients, is all about how we can deliver sustainable medicines and the products to our patients, right from the product design to manufacturing, distribution, and delivering these medicines to our patients. And now third, about our planet. And for our planet, we have set very ambitious targets to minimize our impact on environment. And this is across these three dimensions of climate, waste, and water. For climate, we aim to be a net zero company. And through our glide path towards net zero, we have defined key milestones through our end state, that we want to be carbon neutral in our own operations by 2025 and want to be full carbon neutral across our entire value chain by 2030. Or for waste, we want to reduce our waste by 50% and want to be a plastic neutral company by 2030. And similarly, on the waterfront, we are reducing our water consumption by 50% in our operations and make sure that the quality of water remains intact, both in our own sites as well as our suppliers' manufacturing sites. And our ambition is to really to be a water sustainable company by 2030. Just to summarize, our sustainability ambition is really focused around the three key stakeholders that we serve to: our people, our patients, and our planet. And we really aim to be a net zero, plastic neutral, and a water sustainability company. So this is really how we really see the sustainability as part of our organization, Sridevi.
Thank you, Deepak, for bringing those three aspects: people, planet, and patients. I think it's kind of summarizes it really well. Thank you for sharing your views. Okay, let's moving on with the discussion. Perhaps the next question, Parag, for you. We all have heard about circular economy, right? And that is something which almost all the businesses are now focusing. So how do you, from a manufacturing perspective, move away from a system of frequently procuring, using, and discarding resources to kind of closing the loop and using and reusing resources over and over? Can you share us your views on that, please?
Indeed. Happy to share our views on it. And being a manufacturer, we have a very, very long supply chain, right? In the case of tires, which is our main product, the starting point is those rubber plantations from where the rubber is tapped. and then it moves through various intermediaries, comes to our operation, goes to customers who like ourselves who use the tires in the cars, and eventually sometimes ends up in landfill. So we have a role to play in each of these, and we are taking a very comprehensive view on that. And that, I think, is what the true meaning of circularity is. First of all, in the rubber plantations, we are working very closely with rubber farmers to help them improve the yields, to help them reduce the disease of the trees, and to replenish whatever the rubber plantation they are doing. So this is an activity done across the world by the Bridgestone Group. And I think this will ensure a steady flow of renewable materials. Secondly, we have very large operations. We are large manufacturing. In India, we have 2 large operations. We employ close to 3,000 people. So as a consequence of that, we are using natural resources such as energy, such as water. And here again, we are trying to move away from the traditional sources of energy into more renewable sources like solar energy, like biomass. So there's a lot of work that is going on within the operations, which is the traditional way that manufacturing looks. But these two are, while impactful, they're not as big. I would say the biggest impact we can have is in our products, because we are selling millions and millions of tires to all consumers across the country. So a slight modification in those tires, either to reduce the weight so that we use less raw material, or better still, to make them with a low rolling resistance, wherein the fuel consumed by automobiles is reduced. That has a huge impact on the circularity or the sustainability agenda. And we have been a pioneer in bringing out products which are lighter, and also which help consumers to get more mileage out of their fuel. And then now, something which is coming up more recently is how do we deal with the tires once they finish their useful life. Typical way, and not just with tires, with plastic packaging, with everything, it goes into landfill, and that's not a very sustainable way. So now we are working very, very with a lot of focus to find new ways to recycle the tires, either to take some components and bring them back to our manufacturing process, or if that is not possible, to find alternate use. It can be in roads, it can be in construction, it can be in floor mats. A variety of uses are there. So all in all, we try to look at our sort of impression or footprint on the society, right from the time we get the raw materials to the time where our products are finally used and finished. And a lot of work to do in all of these, but happy to say that it has gained a lot of traction and gained a lot of also business benefits, I would say.
Great. It's good to see how different stakeholders are kind of connected and are playing a key role in this entire value chain.
Yeah, and one final point I'd like to make, I think sustainability has started to take off because technology has caught up, and suddenly it makes good business sense as well. Solar energy was always there, but very few people were adopting it because it was way more expensive than traditional energy. But now with the advent of technology and with some support of government policies, it has become very competitive. And in fact, it is cheaper to use solar power. So that's when the adoption really goes through the roof. And technology is really impacting all these things I talked about, increasing or accelerating the adoption.
Thank you for that, Parag. Sanjay, moving on to you. So when we were catching up earlier, you had mentioned that sustainability is giving you an opportunity to create more value to your stakeholders, which also includes the communities. And at the same time, you're able to drive business growth and customer connect. Can you talk more about this? What exactly do you mean by, it is giving an opportunity to increase the consumer connect as such and drive business growth?
Sure. Let me elaborate my view on this, Sridevi. So basically, when we were talking about this, the reason why I was saying that businesses need to make their product more sustainable. Let me provide you some numbers from a recent Deloitte survey, right, where 32% of consumers mentioned that they are highly engaged in adopting a more sustainable lifestyle. Equally important, there was 28% consumers who said that they have stopped buying certain products because of ethical and environment concerns in those companies, right? And again, if we look at the Gen Z, then these percentages are even higher. So the point I'm trying to make is that, see, there is this large consumer base which are eager to adopt a sustainable lifestyle, right? And also worth noting, as a point was made about technology. Let me also bring into picture the entire role that digital marketing plays, right? Today, digital marketing tools give businesses an easy and a more cheaper opportunity to help consumers be a part of their sustainability plan. Such campaigns actually create a unique opportunity for a brand where the brand can actually connect to the consumers on their sustainability drive, and this will also help them driving visibility and sales of their brands. Let me give you an awesome example of one of our own brands. We have a brand called Angel's Envy. Angel's Envy is a straight bourbon brand which is bottled in Americas. So as we know that for all aged spirits, there is a need of oakwood barrels, where the spirit is put into those barrels to get their unique flavors from the maturation process. Angel's Envy brand team decided that to make a positive environmental impact on nature, they ran a campaign with the hashtag Toast the Trees, right? Under this campaign, whenever any consumer posted a picture of having an Angel's Envy drink with a hashtag, with this hashtag on their social media account, the company planted a oak tree in the forest, right? So we had a tie-up with an NGO and various forest departments which did this work for us. And the big part is that as part of this campaign, 52,000 oak trees have been planted so far in Kentucky and West Virginia. So the point I'm trying to make, Sridevi, is that such campaigns where you make the consumer itself a part of your sustainability vision, it helps you not only to drive your brand visibility and sales, but it also it can make a positive environmental impact.
Thank you, Sanjay, for sharing that. Let's move on to Deepak now. So integrating sustainability within business function is important for driving positive change, right? We all agree. So do you have any examples on how you are actually integrating sustainability in your daily business decisions as such?
Thank you, Sridevi, for the question. And I think it is very important because we should not look sustainability as a centralized or enterprise function. Rather, it should be looked at as part of our culture that we are nurturing, and it should be integrated within our function or within each individual. And I pretty much personally see it more like a quality functions. So like quality, when you say quality, we do have quality function in the company, but quality is not one's group or one function's responsibility, it's everybody's responsibility. So similarly, what we see that in our journey towards a sustainable future, we really need to make it part of how we are doing business, how we are operating on a daily basis, and how we are making decisions. And I will give you an example here, like for all our investment decisions, like what we calculate the NPV, which is the net present value. Similarly, in Novartis, what we are doing for all our major investments in our company, we are integrating sustainability NPV to really embedding the monetized environmental impact in our business case. For example, for any situation, you have an alternatives and you have a pre-scenario and you have a post-scenario. So for sustainability, we really look at in terms of what does it mean in terms of my energy consumption? What does it mean in terms of materials that I'm using, solvents I'm using for processing, or the water that we are consuming? And for each of these components, we have something called an internal price. For example, we have an internal carbon price of $100 per ton. For plastics, we have like $550 per ton. And similarly, based on different components, we really calculate what does it mean from a sustainability NPV. I will say this is one just example, but the important message I want to pass to the group here is that we really cannot be successful in making change unless and until we onboard everyone, and starting with our employees first, and also include our suppliers and other stakeholders so that we can really make it a part of our regular business, how we operate.
Thank you, Deepak. In fact, even in Accenture, we have a 360-degree value creation, which covers across your clients, suppliers, sustainability, I&D, and all those aspects. And together we measure the value we are creating as such. Thank you for that. Moving on to Tarun. Tarun, what are some of the challenges you are facing in your area in achieving sustainability, and how are you kind of managing those challenges?
Oh, yeah. So I think that's a great question. See, I think we have three main challenges. One is that while it's definitely a CXO agenda now, many companies don't have the right measurement systems. We, coming from a Lean Six Sigma background, We believe that if you can't improve something which you can't measure, so establishing the measurement system is very important. So what we are doing is helping our clients create the carbon calculators, doing carbon audits, and quantify the performance. Right? Once you have the data, you can do a lot of analytics. You can generate insights which can give rise to many projects, right? And then again measure the performance of project to eventually lead them towards the carbon goal. The second challenge is the ownership. I think somebody mentioned this point. Sustainability is everybody's agenda. So it is for everyone to contribute. I think as an individual first, and then as a professional. The question is, do we, have the right personal discipline? Small things like switching off the lights in the room when we are going out, right? Not ordering cutleries when we are ordering food online and so on. So we are doing a lot of awareness, not only for our clients, for our internal organization about the personal responsibility of this agenda. And then make sure that, okay, as an individual, how are you contributing to the organization's sustainability goals? And the third, I think Parag made this point that there are a lot of government incentives coming, but my opinion is that we still need a lot from the government, especially in a renewable energy, which are not very predictable. Right? You have wind, but you need to forecast the wind accurately. For that, you should forecast the demand. So I think the government and industry has to come together more to create a lot of solutions, which one, reduce the cost of operations for the renewable energy producers, and two, do accurate analytics to make sure that the ecosystem is self-sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you, Tarun, for that. I think the self-discipline is so apt, right? So I keep saying, as an energy professional, personally, I feel the day I don't try to keep my dustbin outside my apartment, that's when I feel my personal goals have been achieved. And as an energy professional, the day we switch over to completely renewable energy, that's when my goals are achieved. So that's the way I kind of summarize it. Thank you for sharing your views. Maybe the next question to Parag. Parag, being part of the manufacturing industry, supply chain plays a very big role in addressing sustainability, right? So what are your views in this, and how are you managing challenges around this space?
Yeah, so I mean, what we are talking of now, and I heard a lot of examples across, very good examples, but they are still very new. So I think there are three main challenges to make such a significant shift. And I talk about for the whole population, and let's refer to India in this case. The first is social, and you are giving examples of that. Each individual has to feel the responsibility and has to feel the need, and then has to go and make the change. So I think there is a huge social aspect to it. The second one, I alluded to it before, is an economic aspect. We will all do it if it makes business sense, if it costs us less. If tomorrow electric vehicles were much, much cheaper and went further, then we would all buy it. So there is an economic angle, and there I think technology has a big role to play. And then, of course, third, we must remember that there is also a time limitation, right? So because we are talking of a huge change. I mean, we have been living this way for decades now, and suddenly to shift, it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to be a long time. So these are the main challenge areas that I see for making any kind of change. And this, I believe, applies not just to manufacturing and our supply chains, but also to society in general. I may venture forward to say that how things, where we have had success, what has worked, and where we have not had success, what have been the reasons. So I would say the first one is, I truly believe, and I probably made this point before as well, that any sustainability initiative has to make good business sense from a business point of view. If it ends up impacting the bottom line, then it is going to take regulation or is going to take some form of coercion to get it embedded. So I believe that all of us as leaders should focus on finding solutions where there is a business rationale as well. And once we find that, it will fly. And I gave you the example of solar. There's another example we have in the company. It's of using biomass as a fuel instead of the traditional oil or gas. There again, suddenly it started to make a lot of sense when biomass was very easily available and was available cheaper. Then suddenly it makes a lot of sense, and it also helps the economy in general, because otherwise all of these would have been waste. So that business sense made the shift happen very quickly. So technology, will help this business sense. So I think you guys who are working within the technology sector have also a very important role to play. One, to find those technologies. Secondly, to go out and convince manufacturers like ourselves that it makes good business sense as well. And the third thing, of course, is the time part. But there, I believe it has started to move. And the next generation is actually going to be the one which will really drive it, because they think about it right from a very, very young age and from their school days. For our generation, I think it came as an afterthought in our mid-30s or so, because there were more pressing issues when we were growing up. So these are the three challenges that I foresee, and the way that they can be overcome, I have given some experiences on that.
Thank you, Parag, for that. And in fact, I reckon that for the coal to get actually to the level what it is as of today, it took 60 years to become the further source of energy what it is. Similarly for oil and gas. So we are hoping our renewables doesn't follow the same trajectory, and we're able to kind of cut down that life cycle make it much shorter, and we'll be able to kind of tread on this path sooner than later, right? Okay, thank you for sharing your view, Parag, on that. Sanjay, what about, can you share your perspective? Even in your industry, supply chain plays a very big role, right? What are some of the risks you're seeing, and how are you mitigating those challenges?
Right. So basically, coming to supply chain, obviously, supply chain has a very important role to play in driving sustainability. And every industry, as we know, surely has its own set of challenges and opportunities in this area. At Bacardi, we believe that people and nature, they have a very symbiotic relationship, and unless nature is also prospers, it's impossible for people to prosper. So that's the mindset that we go ahead with. And while we are helping people directly, we are also doing a lot of work on reducing the environmental impact of our supply chain. And the three pillars that we follow are reduction, restoration, and revitalization. Right. So like other industries, we also have challenges, right? The challenges of water, emission, packaging, waste management. Those are challenges which every industry has. And again, Alcobev industry is an industry which is dependent upon agricultural products, right? So basically, as we know, spirit is made by the fermentation and distillation of various agricultural crops. So obviously, how do we as a company partner with farmers on sustainable farming practices? That's the other key focus areas. However, let me also tell you that one is to set up a vision, but the other is to go head first into enabling various works that can meet that vision. So in Bacardi, for example, we set a target of doing a zero waste to landfill in all our operations by 2022. I'm proud to say that we are already there at the beginning of 2022. We are already 99.8% there. All our brand manufacturing sites, whether it is Bacardi rums in Puerto Rico, whether it is Grey Goose vodka in France, Bombay Sapphire Gin in London, the Doer Scotch whiskies in Scotland, Martini wines in Italy, the Petron tequilas in Mexico, all of our manufacturing sites have green waste practices in place. Parag was mentioning about wind energy, solar energy, biomass as a fuel, alternative fuels, all of that. I think all of that is a great learning that we have also incorporated into our practices. And so obviously that's the role we want to keep on following and make our positive impact on environment.
Thank you, Sanjay, for sharing your views. I think we are almost close to the time allocated to us. Last 2-3 minutes, so I'll probably go a quick round robin. Your 30-second summary on what are you expecting to happen now? What is that? How are you going to solve the challenge? If you can summarize that in 30 seconds, that will be really helpful. Probably I'll start with Deepak.
No, thanks, Sridevi. I think what I'm really very optimistic about is, like as Parag also mentioned, that I think we need to be very honest that for the fact that the green products today come with a very high cost, and bringing down this green premium is really essential for us as we transition to the, I think, net zero economy or a better world there. And what I really have now seeing some prediction that the next 1,000 unicorns won't be search engines or the social media companies. I think they will be sustainable, scalable innovation companies that will really help to decarbonize the world and also to make this transition more affordable for all the consumers. So with this hope, we really believe that the future ahead will be much brighter, more greener, and more sustainable for all of us.
Thank you, Deepak. Tarun, over to you.
Yeah, sure. I think we all should realize that Earth has got fever. And better act on it. I think time is running out, and people can absolutely run faster. In this decade, we have a lot of technology at this disposal to accelerate the journey. At a personal level, as a social being, and to the companies we work on. Thank you.
Thank you, Tarun. Sanjay?
Yeah, so I would put it in one sentence. As I said, while we are enjoying our good spirits, let's also, be thoroughly dedicated to being good spirited.
Thank you. Parag?
So I think we stand at a very important junction and a good junction, because there is that realization of the importance of sustainability and protecting our environment, and there is the technology to support that and to enable that. And therefore, I think sustainability is going to become the core of every organization's business strategy.
Thank you, Parag. As far as I'm concerned, I strongly believe we need the planet. Planet doesn't need us, right? So there is a urgent need for us to kind of rewire the entire energy system of the globe, and that definitely will take a lot of effort. Things might not be very smooth for us, but for the sake of our children and not necessarily planet, because planet doesn't really need us, right? And for the future generation, we really need to take some hard steps now, and it might be uncomfortable, but yeah, we need to be prepared for that. With that note, I'll hand it over back to Sadvika.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. That was such an informative session with so many enlightening points. The panelists definitely highlighted the importance of businesses adopting sustainable and circular business models and goals and targets that they have set, and how they attempt to include both their value chain and their clients. And they also touched upon the challenges that they often face and the roles that they as organizations could play in helping to mitigate the effect of global warming. I think it's also very safe to say that almost all the leading businesses in India have set similar intentions, and I'm very confident that with their support, India will be on its way to meeting its emission reduction goals. So thank you, panelists, for that incredible session. So as we know, there is an ever-increasing demand for transparency around corporate action from a multitude of stakeholders. Consumers and investors are increasingly cautious of greenwashing and goodwashing. And it is in this context that sustainability reporting has gone beyond being just a tick in the box. Whether it's done for compliance or voluntarily, it influences consumer choices, investor choices, employee choices, and supplier choices. Taking this topic forward, we have our next panel on the growing relevance of sustainability reporting. We have with us Dr. Aditi Haldar, Director, Global Reporting Initiative. Dr. Haldar is an expert on sustainable development with over 25 years of work experience. Currently, in her role as the Director of GRI South Asia, she advocates the mainstreaming of measurement, management, reporting, and public transparency of ESG information to create trustworthy market and societal conditions. Our next panelist, Ms. Prarthana Bora, is the Director of India CDP. She has over 25 years of experience in strategy planning and program leadership. She is a sector expert in air quality and climate change, biodiversity conservation, and education for sustainable development. This panel is a truly women-empowered one, with our next panelist being Dr. Divya Sharma, Executive Director, Climate Group. Dr. Sharma is an international consultant on urban policy and planning, urban infrastructure, and climate resilience with an overall experience of over 18 years. She possesses excellent regional knowledge across climate change domain, including adaptation and mitigation, and international dialogues pertinent to the same. Our last panelist completing the quorum is Mr. Kumar Swami Shekara, Vice President and Head of Sustainability, DSI Group India Private Limited. Mr. Chandra Shekara comes with over 32 years of work experience comprising 11 years in the chemical process industry in fields of manufacturing, technical services, and process design, 21 years as a third-party auditor, assessor, validator, verifier, and trainer. He has been a member of the global leadership team for climate change services in DNV for 4 years. Bringing his expertise on the topic, we have with us Mr. Andeshi Gatta, CEO at Adquest Sustainable Solutions Private Limited. Mr. Gutta has industry experience of over 19 years in the IT consulting and social impact space. Today, he drives corporate sustainability, climate tech, climate education, and ESG strategies through his venture Adquest. I'm sure that with such heavyweights taking over the reins, the discussion ought to be captivating. Over to you, Mr. Gutta.
Thanks, Chandra. Thanks for that introduction. The topic, growing relevance of sustainability reporting. I mean, sustainability reporting is going through a facelift today. There's a renewed spotlight on it. In fact, there are ongoing efforts to aggregate sustainability reporting standards and frameworks through the recently announced ISSB. There's growing demand for synchronization between financial and non-financial reports, which is annual reports and sustainability reports, in other words. There are regulations like the BRSR in India, the EU taxonomy, and the CSRP in the UK, in the EU, that are knocking on the doors. It is in this backdrop that the discussion today with my co-panelists here gathers its significance. Let's start with some opening statements from each of the panelists, and then that'll help us take the conversation further. In no particular order, let me start with Dr. Aditi Haldar, so that we hear from you for the next 2 minutes, just to understand what's your take on the whole aspect of sustainability reporting, and we'll take it forward from there. Dr. Haldar.
Yeah. Hi, thank you very much. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So I am Aditi, as Avneshi, announced, and it's great to be here in this forum with NASSCOM and the Center of Excellence. As you know, GRI is a global and international organization, and we are an independent organization. Although our headquarters is based out of Netherlands, but we are very much an independent how can we, meaning GRI, creates the global common language for organizations to report their impacts. This enables informed dialogue and decision-making around these impacts. So GRI envisions a sustainable future enabled by transparency and open dialogue about impacts, and the future in which reporting on impacts can become a common practice by all organizations around the world. Seems for that as a standard setter for impact reporting, we follow an independent multi-stakeholder process, and as you may know that the GRI standard is a public good. So there is no commercial transaction which happens by using the GRI standard. And we are very proud that we are working in several economies with different dimensions and different dynamics, and the government, policymakers, regulators, investors, businesses, academia, labor organizations, they are all there as part of our strong 30,000 institutions to understand the implication of sustainability reporting and how the GRI standard can provide every organization, whether it is a report preparer or a report user, to refer to this common language of sustainability and transparency. Over to Avneshi. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Aditi. That was very helpful. While we were listening in, I think there seems to be some sort of a technical issue at your end. Maybe you could sort it out while we move on to the other panelists. I'll come over to you, Pratna. Pratna, if you could bring in your perspective on sustainability reporting, the way CDP sees it, and that'll help us take this forward. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel. So before I go into what CDP does, I think what I want to actually start with saying that, climate change is real and we are all getting very conscious of it. And just, if you look at just the past panel, it was so nice to see so many CEOs actually talking about action for climate change. So I think sustainability reporting and disclosure is here to stay. It is a win-win situation for companies to report and disclose because ultimately it is about good business. It is about less costs and it's about reputation. So I think from that perspective, disclosure is something that is going to be the future in terms of not just reporting, but in terms of also gauging and assessing as well as active action on the ground in terms of climate impact. So from that perspective, I think at CDP, what we want to do is provide the scientific base plus comparative base in terms of how to use data and how do you actually account for what you're doing in the production space. So this is the background. And at CDP, what we do is we help companies disclose in three areas in terms of what is the climate impact, what is their impact on water security, and how are they contributing to conservation of forests. So these are the three areas where we look at company disclosing in terms of data and also providing the forum to have a comparative with other companies. So we have a scoring mechanism which actually positions companies on a scale from A to F. So basically, one company can learn from the other in terms of where it stands in terms of the other company, and also learn about good practices, innovations, and climate mitigation from others. So that is where I come from. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Pratna. And I believe the ecosystem that is building over years that I've noticed with CDP, the number of companies only keep growing year after year. So which is a very encouraging sign for everyone in this space. So that's a very good positive to take into consideration. Yeah. So with that said, I'll move on to our next panelist, Dr. Divya Sharma. If you could come in and share your views on sustainability reporting, also through the lens of the climate group, which does a lot of mission programs that we are all aware of. So please take the floor.
Thank you, Anveshi. Many thanks for having me here. Am I audible? Is it fine?
Yes.
Great. Good evening to all those who are present and glad to be part of this Esteem panel today. I will very quickly introduce Climate Group. Climate Group is an international NGO with offices in US, India, headquartered in UK. We also have office in China and a new one in Europe. Our mission is to drive climate action fast. And our goal is a world of net zero carbon emissions by 2050 with greater prosperity for all. That said, we focus on systems with the highest emissions and where our networks have the greatest opportunity to drive change. We do this by building large and influential networks and holding organizations accountable, turning their commitments into action. We share what we achieve together to show more organizations what they could do. And in a way, reporting is an essential element to the commitments that businesses take when they come together with us, with our initiatives. So forward-looking businesses, experts from the industry, and senior leadership from policy acknowledge and understand the critical role of corporate climate action in India at the moment, particularly on the path of net zero. Furthermore, voluntary action by businesses will help India achieve its NDCs by 2030. And it's a daunting task, we must agree. So our endeavor is that we work through our 100 campaigns, which is called RE100, EP100, EV100, and now Steel Zero, allow companies to publicly commit to doing their part for the energy transition by switching to renewable electricity, investing on energy productivity, and adopting electric vehicles. These campaigns with clear mandates can become a powerful tool in companies' sustainability reporting process also. So coming from commitments, taking actions, and reporting, This is the route basically, which gives us a fair insight on the performance of businesses on these initiatives and the action that they are taking after the commitments that they had got into. We get this analysis of performance by regions when we look at the reports and how companies acknowledge their work. Because these are also global initiatives, we know what regions are faring and how they are doing. And by these endeavor and by these conversations and through these platforms that we have provided through our campaigns, we can also understand the barriers and challenges. The forums that these initiatives provide help us to generate critical mass to be able to inform policy as well, or at least bring businesses and government together to influence future policies. So that is the potential of these initiatives that we are working with.
Perfect. So we'll definitely have a question or two just on that very topic, because I think setting the ambition right is a very important aspect of doing the longer roadmap of sustainability reporting, let's say.
Absolutely.
So I'm definitely going to come to you with some queries as we progress into the discussion. Let me move on to Mr. Kumar Swami Shekara, veteran in this space. So definitely somebody from whom we want to hear his views on this whole aspect of sustainability reporting and also the whole climate neutrality aspect at large. So over to you, Mr. Chandrasekhara.
Yeah. Thank you, Anveshi, and a very good afternoon to all of you. I represent the British Standards Institution, a company headquartered in UK, founded in the year 1901, and since 1901 and until today, and even in the future, one of our primary activities has been coming up with the world's requirements on management system standards. You must have heard about ISO 9001, ISO 14001, the one on quality management systems, environment management systems, and several such ISO standards. Much of these standards originally was brought out by BSI, and once it became popular, the ISO Council took over and then gave it an ISO tag. So we have been in this business of coming up with the standards right from 1901. And having said that, not only do we come up with the world's requirements on standards, but we also do a whole lot of training and capacity building to enable organizations actually interpret and implement these management system standards effectively. And naturally, following this effective implementations, we also do a whole lot of verifications, validations, assessments, and audits, and then award certificates to the company and ensure that over a period of time, through periodical surveillance audits, the continual improvement happens. So this is by and large what we do. Having said that, to be a little more precise, we help develop standards and standardization solutions to meet the needs of the business and society, and actively support clients and organizations to advocate best practice. What is important is these standards actually advocate best practices for organizations to take note of and implement, champion sustainability, and boost organizational resilience. And over the years, we've developed expertise and shared best practices in the areas of environmental management, waste management, greenhouse gas emissions management, pollution management, and many other areas of interest in the field of sustainability. And it's just not sustainability per se. We are also into performance management improvement. We are in the area of risk management and the whole lot of these. And finally, as a bottom line, all I would like to say is sustainability strategy, and sustainability reporting on the performance periodically by organizations is here to stay, and it is indeed the need of the hour.
Can't agree more, Mr. Chandrasekhara. That's absolutely true. In fact, with the kind of expertise that this panel brings to the table, I'm sure we're covering pretty much every phase of a life cycle, let's call it so, of a corporate sustainability agenda. So it's very wonderful to have that diversity in this panel. So let's jump into the conversation, take this conversation to the next level. Maybe I'll start with Dr. Divya Sharma, because that's something that is interesting when we talk of commitments. And so sustainability reports, we know they capture the story of the firm's actions in the preceding period. But our experience in this regard has been that for the story to demonstrate ambition, responsibility, impact, it's important to look at where it all begins, which is exactly at the commitment phase, the business commitment phase. So Climate Group, like you mentioned in your introductory remarks, has a lot of programs around EV100, RE100, EP100, which look at that particular commitment coming out in the open. So could you elaborate on this observations that you would have made in this regard about how these pledges can be translated to real action on the ground? They don't remain just pledges on paper.
Thank you, Anveshi. I think that's a brilliant question, and I like the way you framed this question. So spot on. To begin with, Climate Group's campaigns are not just pledges. These are absolute commitments that forward-looking businesses have taken up and involves 100% transition over the target year. Overall, more than 500 major global companies are actively reducing their emissions by making a commitment around at least one of Climate Group's initiatives or commitments, as you say. Over 345 members of RE100, for example, have pledged to power 100% of their operation with renewable electricity, representing over 350 terawatt hours of annual energy consumption. Similarly, our EP100 initiative campaign is a network of over 125 companies committed to improving their energy productivity. And in EV100 campaign, over 110 corporates have committed to transitioning more than 5 million vehicles and installing charging stations at more than 7,000 properties around the world. So I'm giving these numbers because it kind of tells us how these pledges are being translated into actions. And there are numbers that we speak of, which actually tell us about the impact that is being created. Now, all these initiatives, all 4 initiatives of Climate Group have helped companies develop early benchmarks and establish common standards for sustainability reporting. So from benchmark to reporting and in between the action that is taken, there is a whole lot of, service area that is, taking place. And several of our members are keen to share knowledge and inspire others to act as well. And we give them that platform. In partnership with CDP, we publish our annual disclosure reports that guide our future work, as well as help us ascertain impact of these initiatives, as I said earlier. And these reports present the data behind the initiative, holding it and its member accountable by showing how they are putting their commitments into action. I'll give you an example of RE100 campaign. The data demonstrate the scale of demand and the pivotal role that corporations play in increasing renewable electricity capacity and also opening access to renewable electricity in new markets. So data from our recent RE100 annual disclosure report with CDP helps us recognize many important findings. For example, it tells us that RE100 member, now 349 companies, consume more electricity combined than the entire UK annually and are sourcing nearly 45% of their electricity needs through renewable electricity already. And this is a pathway that we can see where they are heading to. So it's not only impact, it's also a roadmap that we can see, a futuristic one, definitely. So you see, we can ascertain region-wise progress and also challenges and barriers. And likewise, we have data, we have understanding from the performance of businesses who are part of our initiatives. Thank you.
It's really heartening to see some real stories that you gave us. I mean, that's exactly the kind of thing that we want to hear in these times when greenwashing is kind of also taking up some of the headlines out there. So there is definitely some positive real action happening, and that's heartening. Talking of commitments and taking that conversation a little further, these days the private sector is buzzing with net zero commitments. We've seen corporate leaders that have started to act on these commitments with near-term, mid-term, long-term roadmaps. These are the ones that have led the charter at this point. Again, I'll come to you, Mr. Chandrasekhar. BSI, I know, plays a leading role in ensuring conformance to various standards that help these corporates along the way, including something around the lines of PAS 2050, PAS 2060. These are growing in relevance as well. Could you please throw some light on the need to confirm a strong alignment between these commitments and action? How do you kind of make that real alignment happen?
Yeah, thank you, Anveshi. Let me put it this way. Climate change has been triggered by increasing levels of greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere, resulting in harmful global warming. And to address this problem, and like many other countries, at the recently concluded summit in Glasgow, Scotland, India too committed to a net zero carbon emissions target by 2070. Put simply, net zero, also referred to as carbon neutrality in general, means we are not adding new emissions to the atmosphere. Emissions will continue, but will be balanced by absorbing an equivalent amount from the atmosphere. Now, as more companies step up on climate change, set targets, and jump on this so-called net zero bandwagon, clearly there is one thing that is missing. Strategies and actions to reduce carbon footprints and eventually demonstrate carbon neutrality. The questions that typically follow are, why is there such a large gap between intention, commitment, and action? What should one do to implement and track performance? Organizations are also finding the question, how best can I become carbon neutral? Very difficult to answer. And to address these questions specifically, organizations like BSI actually come into the picture into this space. And as I said a little while ago, BSI helps develop standards and standardized solutions to meet the needs of the business and society, and actively supports clients and organizations to advocate best practices. And through these standards, we give direction to the company. And for example, PAS 2060, the publicly available specification 2060 on carbon neutrality. It's a best practice standard, clearly requiring organizations to come up with a strategy on neutrality over a period of time. It's not something that you can do overnight, just like that. It needs time, it needs planning, it needs resources, and needs to be demonstrated over a period of time. And having said that, these standards actually very clearly advocate and tell companies how to quantify. What are the methods that one could adopt? How do you achieve these reductions over a period of time? You know, you rightly said, many companies have short-term goals and long-term targets, but they lack the vision, they lack the direction towards achieving that. And these standards like PAS 2060 actually help organization towards this goal. And how do you actually offset this? What credible mechanism should organizations adopt? Is it the CDM mechanism? Is it the JI mechanism? Is it the voluntary carbon standards, the gold standards? So what are those credible standards which are typically seen as acceptable by the stakeholder fraternity? These are advocated in these publicly available standards, that is PAS 2060. And as an organization, one can do more than claim their businesses to be carbon neutral. You can give these claims credibility with the internationally accepted standard, as I told you, PAS 2060. This standard, for example, very specifically sets out the requirements for achieving and demonstrating carbon neutrality, allowing you to improve your environmental credentials with accuracy and transparency. And coupled with the carbon footprint verification that BSI also does, it is sort of becoming fundamental to provide credibility. It reassures a whole lot of stakeholders, be it the regulators, be it the customers, the employees, shareholders, potential investors, environmental groups, the media, a whole lot of them, and assures them of the integrity, the completeness, and the transparency of these carbon footprint verifications. And any organization that is actively measuring or establishing the procedures to arrive at its carbon footprint, irrespective of size, industry, or location, can and will benefit from the additional rigor and expertise that these CFC processes brings in through the implementation of these standard requirements. So clearly, standards such as PAS 2050, which is on product carbon footprinting, PAS 2060 on neutrality, ISO 14064, which is on your organization carbon footprinting, will help organizations to adapt, transform, strategize, implement, communicate sustainability performance and better allocators also. That's how I see it.
That's wonderful. In fact, as you kept speaking, the one word that kept ringing in my mind is accountability. There's got to be that accountability through and through, whether it's in the form of the fact that you've got a checklist and audit that's going to be audited against, whether it's in terms of measurement, whichever way you look at it, that's important at this end. When stakeholders are getting so very interested in what a corporate is doing truly on sustainability. So there's of course, that kind of moves me to the next query, which is essentially around the fact that the shareholder centricity is gradually shifting to stakeholder centricity these days, and sustainability reporting in that very context has gained a lot of prominence. There's regulations, of course, that are coming in, like I mentioned earlier, BRSR, EU taxonomy. Because of which there's a call for clear, transparent, consistent, holistic reporting at regular intervals. Now, GRI, we've heard earlier, GRI has been a leader in sustainability reporting space for years now, much before these regulations even came in. So my question, Dr. Aditi, is how do you see the emergence of sustainability reporting over the years, and what do you think would be a future outlook for reporting in your own perspective?
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Nishi. Am I audible now? I think initially my voice was breaking a bit. Yeah. So 25 years have gone by, that GRI is in the market, and we started by looking at only making the businesses become part of the journey of imbibing sustainability reporting and equivalent of financial reporting. But it took time because GRI tried to create the ecosystem. And the ecosystem got only created by creating the demand for sustainability reporting. So we in the beginning, I was also part of that group in the 2001, 2, 3, and so on, where the stakeholders who contributed to the GRI guidelines development and the improvement and going on to the standard, they said, no, we are not going to engage with governments and policymakers. However, that scenario has completely changed, and both the GRI fraternity and the different stakeholders realize that unless the policymakers come in, nothing will change, because to an extent, reporting from voluntary nature, it has
we seem to be having an issue with Dr. Aditi's network. I'll probably...
Yeah, can you hear me now? I'm switching so that is more
Maybe
clear.
that'll help. Yeah, please, let's try that. Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
So I just finished quickly, and I'm sorry about this internet connection. So the thing is that the voluntary part is still there, because business and promoters, business promoters, they know where the risks and opportunities are. It's just that the smart organizations realizes that the investors also are very keen to understand where the risks and opportunities are. So sustainability reporting is the process of measuring, managing, changing, and disclosing. But unfortunately, the communication part becomes very important. So even if a company is, measuring, managing, and changing, at the end, what happens in the boardroom generally is that the communication part becomes more important than everything else. And the key risks and opportunities then become hidden. So my, I think, opinion and perspective, or, I think my understanding so far has been that this is there, but it is changing now, because businesses are beginning to see that reporting is not about waiting to be reactive and waiting for a policymaker or a regulator to show a stick, but it is also about carrots, and the GRI standard remains to be very, very, I think, engaging with the different changes that is happening. For example, the IFRS. where they have created the ISSB and they are looking at investors' demand and what is the financial implication of sustainability impacts to an enterprise. If we look at the European Union and their sustainability reporting standard, GRI got invited to become the co-constructor, and the ESRS, when it will come out, it will actually influence 50,000 companies. And then imagine all the supply chain which are based out of countries like ours, where the implication of sustainability reporting and disclosure will not become a regulation, but also become a code of conduct. Because if the business wants to do good business and long-term business, they have to start disclosing. There is no way out. And the other trend I see here, which is my last one, is that traceability is becoming very important. So every product or services which is manufactured, created, and is being marketed for any kind of financial implication will be demanded or expected to understand what are the environmental and social issues which are tied to that manufacturing and the service delivery. So if traceability becomes important, then we are sure that reporting will be very important down the line. There is no way out for us. Yes, Audi.
Thanks, Dr. Aditi. I think the fact that it's not just about regulations making us do it, the fact that it's actually something that makes true business sense, good business sense, like you put it, is the underlying point. I mean, that's how it's got to be understood. If you were to only wait for the stick, like you said it, then things are just being done to get that tick in the box, which is no longer the way to look at it. Taking that a step further from reporting would be essentially what Pratna mentioned CDP does, benchmarking. And that's a very interesting aspect, which definitely kind of puts it in black and white in terms of where you really stand in the overall picture. So CDP manages what we know as one of the most widely adopted sustainability disclosure platforms, and that's globally. It also invests significant resources to assess those reports that are submitted, benchmarks companies based on their inputs across different parameters. So my question here, Pratna, would be on the lines of how important are these annual disclosures and benchmarking exercises for stakeholders to build what we all would want to call an informed view of a particular corporate? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, thank you. And I'm going to continue from where Aditi left off, because I think she spoke very, very strongly about the fact that, reporting is not just here to stay, but it is going to be an accepted phenomena. So basically, if you look at our disclosure platform, already about 590 plus investors use that information to make impactful decisions on investment. So if you speak in simple language, not corporate language, these are intelligent decisions on investment in water security, in climate impact, and also for preservation of forests. So ultimately, we are making good money decisions on how we are going to protect the environment. So basically, the disclosure platform is not just about the data that is available, but it's making the data available to people who matter, who are going to actually take decisions in terms of where they're going to engage with the right businesses so that we have a positive impact on environment. So that is one aspect. Then there is, of course, the businesses themselves. And as I said in the beginning, the businesses are beginning to realize that it is for their reputation that they will have to disclose. And when I say they have to disclose, it's also about understanding their business processes. So when you are disclosing, you're talking about your processes in production, your energy usage, and your waste management practices. So you're already revisiting these and thinking about innovation in terms of impacting the climate positively. So I think about 73% of the companies, about the 14,000 companies reported to us in 2021. And these companies, actually, about 73% of them said that they want to disclose because it's good for their reputation. And this is voluntarily said, which is because, the reputation matters. Today, we have we have a consumer base who is interested and is demanding sustainability. It's not just the investors, it's also the consumers. So that's one. The other aspect is, businesses realize that by disclosing, they also are on a path towards cost saving, because you're looking at energy efficiency, you're looking at several practices which are going to contribute to reducing your costs. So I think from that perspective, at least 1 out of 3 companies was saying that it's good business sense to disclose. And the third aspect which you talked about in terms of benchmarking, I think about 58% companies that disclosed to us said that it makes them competitive. By disclosure makes them competitive, which means they understand processes undertaken by other companies, and they also understand how you can actually achieve a better goal or standard in terms of your processes. So I think these are some of the areas in which the benchmarking helps, because because the data is publicly available, because investors are looking at one versus the other, the business community themselves want to to work against a benchmark. But I think the final aspect which we do not talk as much, and Aditi did touch about it in terms of the policy, I think there is another aspect. This data can be a feedback mechanism for policy. So, in terms of achieving national goals, in terms of climate change, you are able to identify the good companies versus, the not so sustainable companies. So I think that also is something that has not been explored enough. And I think that also helps in the benchmarking, because policy begins to realize that there are certain sector or certain, certain parts of the corporate sector that can contribute to the policy. So I think this is the multi-stakeholder approach in terms of how benchmarking helps in achieving climate action. Stop there.
That's excellent. In fact, the fact that sustainability through benchmarking exercises and the like could actually come across as something that gives a competitive edge. I think that's something that definitely will kind of increase the interest, I would say, in the boardrooms, if not the fact that there's already a climate crisis. I mean, the climate crisis is in itself a good awakening point, but if it hasn't done it yet, then at least the competitive edge aspect should definitely wake them up enough. So, and in the long term, that's another aspect that they should be definitely looking at. And thanks for touching upon the policy bit. And probably because you brought it up on the policy front, and Dr. Divya Sharma, I'll come back to you. Talking of the same programs that you mentioned and introduced earlier, the RE100s, the EV100s, and the like, do you see them kind of driving any potential rewiring of enterprise-wide policies? As much as public policy could be an aspect that could be driven through them, is there also a potential for them to drive enterprise-wide policies, process changes, or behavioral changes also in the larger mix? Any thoughts on that front?
Yes, definitely. And I am happy you asked me this question, because I have some examples, and we are, I think, taking off a big way. Of course, because of the time that we are in, and Pratna was just speaking about benchmarking and how companies are coming forward and how it makes business sense to them. We at Climate Group regularly engage with our members to tell their stories of impact for our yearly reports of our campaign, as I said. The increased visibility and transparency required of members allows them to truly lead by example on climate. And by benchmarking their ambition against their peers, demonstrating what's already possible for companies to achieve today, and sending a strong and unified message to the policymakers. So this is all, coming to reality now. It is all shaped in a way that it is possible to make some of these impactful statements and impactful experiences, translate them into policy asks, for example, and influence policy in some way. We also profile case studies from members that are leading this way and pioneering new approaches at scale. And scale of these operations is also an important concern, so to say, because we are talking about huge transition. And there are barriers. I would not, shy away from saying that there are challenges and barriers that are faced both at the policy level, which is internal policy of the businesses, as well as external policy, which is the public policy, as you said. But the benefit of the platform is also that these initiatives provide what they provide through these initiatives, the information and the examples that are coming up, they are pioneering, and others would follow suit. So I would like to give you some example here from our EV100 initiative. In just a year, the number of electric vehicles deployed by EV100 members has doubled from the last year itself, from 2020. And the total number of vehicles committed to be EV by 2030 as part of EV100 commitments has risen by 80%. So from 4.8 million from the current 1.6 million. So it's like a projection, which we definitely think is going to, work. As well as getting EVs on the roads, EV100 members, and this is the response to the second part of your question. EV100 members are also using their property portfolios, their offices, factories, and stores to build a network of charging infrastructure that supports their staff and customers to also make the switch to EVs. So it's not that they are just talking about official vehicles, EV transition of official vehicles, but they are putting in infrastructure, putting in that kind of messages that their employees and the supply chain partners can also avail this opportunity to transform into EVs and transition into electric. This, in my mind, is going above and beyond to help achieve the target that these companies are committed to, but also facilitating the mental and physical barriers to adopting electric vehicles. The other example is, and this is related to public policy, about our RE100 policy hours. So we have very recently launched RE100 policy framework to enable policy and regulatory environment towards 100% sourcing of renewable power in India. And this framework, it draws on a set of policy hours, providing a clear framework on what it will take to build on enabling policy and regulatory environment for 100% corporate adoption of renewable energy in the coming decade. And the policy framework has been developed by RE100 with support from selected CSOs and industry associations. So it's kind of a practitioners community that has been created, and we are using it to the benefit, so that it's as I said earlier, brings together both policy and the businesses together to understand what is mutually beneficial for both the parties, and also the overall goal of energy transition in India.
I think that's really encouraging. I mean, with all the thoughts that I've heard across the table, there's so much of maturity that I think has happened over the years that we no longer have to really say there's not such an enabling ecosystem that will help transition. The ecosystem is there now. It's all about making that transition happen, and we are definitely at the top of the hour. And so I think we have a next panel ready to walk in. But whatever we've discussed in this panel is heartening enough to say that the relevance of sustainability reporting as the end goal and the process that goes through it, we've kind of managed to clearly bring out the fact that it is something that's got a very stable ecosystem to kind of leverage if you wanted to. So that's the message that I think we should all take back to the audience, and probably leave it there. So we'll probably have to wrap this panel up, and we'll see each other again in some other space. Thank you. Sadvika, over to you then.
Thank you. It was a really amazing discussion, and I'm sure by now the audience have understood the importance of sustainability reporting. It definitely plays a crucial role in keeping organizations on their toes and keeping them accountable, making sure that they have the right tools and they've set the right kind of achievable goals and targets. Like all the panelists mentioned, reporting is definitely here to stay, and it plays an irreplaceable role in climate action. I'd like to thank all the panelists for their valuable insight. Moving on to the next session. I'm sure you're all very well aware, sustainability fuels design, and likewise, design is essential for sustainability. This sustainability quest can help unearth several technological and organizational innovations with top and bottom line returns. So without further ado, let's call forth the final panel of the day, which will focus on the topic, sustainability is a design and innovation problem. I would like to welcome our first panelist, Ms. Shilpa Sri Nayak, Vice President, Digital Transformation and Data Management at Societe Generale Global Solution Center. Ms. Nayak has over 15 years of experience as an innovation evangelist. In her last role, she was heading the Catalyst Corporate Accelerator. Welcome, ma'am. Next, we have Mr. Saravana Mani from Kmart, who heads the Technology Accelerator at Kmart Group Australia. He carries a passion for entrepreneurship and aims to instill it into the general society's DNA. We also have Mr. Gauri Shankar Paramashivam from Maersk. Mr. Paramashivam is heading the Maersk Accelerator for India and China. He is a strategic leader and a hands-on problem solver with diverse expertise in logistics, e-commerce, and banking. He actively thrives on innovation and technology transformation, driving startup partnerships for Maersk. Last but not least, we have Mr. Abhay Tandon, seasoned innovation and transformation leader, who is also an avid angel investor. He has over a decade of experience leading the innovation activities of top MNCs like Lowe's, Abinbev, and Target. To steer the discussion with our esteemed panelists, I would like to call upon Ms. Namrata Rana, Director Strategy and Brand, Futurescape. Ms. Rana's work focuses on preparing companies for the sustainability and net zero transition, and she'll be moderating this session. Over to you, Ms. Rana.
Thank you so much, Sadvika. It's wonderful to be here today with all of you. And my reason for talking about this topic is the fact that there is so much buzz around it. So everybody, right from countries to companies, are talking about the net zero transition, and they're saying that carbon emissions have to reduce. Now there is no two ways about it that those emissions need to reduce, but a lot of conversation is moving around the energy transition. So they're talking about the fact that renewable energy is the way to go, energy optimization is the way to go. There are some people that are talking about circularity, and so there are many conversations that are happening all at the same time. But my premise has been that sustainability is also a design and innovation problem. And that's because for many things, we are using the wrong materials. So for example, why are we using materials that last for hundreds of years for products that we perhaps consume just for a few minutes? Why is it that we are stuck in a cycle of high energy and high carbon emission transportation? And not just personal transportation, but logistics, moving things around, and the kind of unsustainable loops that have been created in terms of the way we grow things, the way we make things, and the way we ship things around. And when we talk about shipping, I have somebody here from Maersk who knows all about it. When we talk about financing the transition, there is Shilpa Sri, who can talk us through the big challenges. And when it comes to innovation, there is Abhay Tandon to help us address many of these issues. But first, the most importantly, the role of finance and what does it really mean for the net zero shift? Shilpa, over to you.
Thank you so much, Namrata. It was a very well delivered context. Thank you so much for setting the stage. So the biggest catalyst has been the banks and the financial institutions, right? We are the ones who fund large energy projects, big ticket financial transformations as well for the organizations. So I guess with ESG becoming more mainstream and at the core of a business strategy, it's no longer a CSR-driven initiative, but it is going to be at the core of every P&L making decision for any business that we will fund in the future. So that is one big foundational shift that has happened in the last couple of years. The second important shift has been around the regulatory changes as well. So even as a bank, even though we do not contribute directly to any carbon emissions, and earlier we were reporting our Scope 1 emissions, which is controlled and owned by us, the biggest changes happened on the regulatory side, where they're also asked to report on Scope 2 and Scope 3 emissions. When I say Scope 2 and Scope 3, it is not the emissions owned by us, but by our suppliers, vendors, clients, and partners. So how do we, start for some of the emissions that we contribute by funding or financing certain activities? So with this new shift, there is definitely, I think, a need in the industry to look at alternative, alliances that can fund. And also commitment of the organizations itself has also been a catalyst. So every organization, whether it is in the retail sector or the shipping sector, logistics, manufacturing units, everybody has committed for a net zero commitment, and the ambitions are quite lower than what we think it is. The ambitions, I guess, for most of the organization has been the 2050. And Society General also signed a climate, impact agreement, Paris Climate Impact Agreement, where we want to go towards a net zero carbon neutrality by 2050, right? And this is not just us, but I'm guessing all the major organizations have signed up a pact to be carbon neutral, to agree on not greenwashing in the reports, making sure that a genuine commitment to reducing the carbon footprint of their transactions and activities without compromising the business or profitability. So with this huge aspirations, it is also a challenge as well as definitely an opportunity for the innovation and the startup ecosystems as well. Because one side we have ambitions that is set, 2050 is the stage for most of the organization, but there is a huge gap from how we move from our current trend to where we want to be in 2050 or even 2040 in some scenarios. So startups are reacting to this gap today. So a lot of startups that we have come across, which are innovatively come up with, which are innovating on the solutions that the corporates cannot, quickly turn around. So especially, I guess there are startups which, are producing ink, let's say, from carbon emissions emitted out of automobiles and converting them into ink and utilities. This is a very innovative startup, right? And they're also converting these utilities for banks like us. I guess MasterCard has signed up with one such startup from India where they're producing the cards, the debit and the credit cards made out of this carbon particulate matter. And then there are startups who are addressing the $1 billion EV market. These are not coming from big corporates first. It is always trending from the startup ecosystem, and they are the ones who have the opportunity to innovate at the ground level. And a lot of startups are also looking at battery life cycle management, alternative powertrains. The opportunities are huge, and in every sector, right? Whether it is packaging industry, or it is just addressing the carbon emission industry, or it is just the way in which we can report the carbon footprint of employees, or drilling down to the activities as well. So we have also come up with a lot of European startups, right, in the last couple of years, where they're even tracking down the activities on your card statement. Let's say if you have your Netflix account, there is a certain carbon emission associated with each of this transaction. So at a person or an individual level, I think to start owning our emissions, not just the organization levels, and it is becoming everyone's problem. So this is where a whole lot of opportunities.
That's fascinating, Shilpa, especially when you said that it's time to start owning our emissions.
Yes.
How do we actually own it? And it's not just one person's problem,
Yeah.
but everybody else's problem. Abhay, would you agree with that? Do you think that startups and innovations that are happening in organizations are actually looking at it in this manner?
True. Shilpa made some very, very interesting and very on point points, right? They were really, really good and very meaningful in today's context, right? And when I look at these trends, from an innovation standpoint, I see, these cycles in two forms, right? There are two sides to the coin, right? One set of activities from an individual standpoint or from an organization standpoint, which are creating a very positive impact, and there's other side which is creating a lot of negative impact as well, right? From a positive standpoint, I see sustainable initiatives all around me today. Literally in the last 10 years, you see a major difference in how a common person perceives sustainability around themselves, right? So, for example, you look at automotive space, there's fierce competition from an EV standpoint, right? Today, there was a news around TVS acquiring a Swiss conglomerate, right? EV conglomerate. 2 weeks back, they had partnered with Swiggy to ensure that they are able to, kind of infuse their EVs into the Swiggy fleet, right? And Swiggy is not just doing that; they're also focusing on packaging, which is recyclable, which is more sustainable for consumers. And these consumers are then, making a lot of changes on the from the daily habits that they're developing, right? So, for example, consuming shoes from Neem Hans, It's a startup which is producing consumer-friendly shoes, which are sustainable in nature, right? To products, cosmetic products from Wow Skin Naturals, and so on and so forth, right? So this chain continues. I have personally invested in 2 startups, both of which are focused on sustainable activities. One of them is creating paperless retail POS systems. Other is a D2C brand, which is focused on natural products for women healthcare and hygiene, right? And so I see that all around myself today, and that's fantastic to see, right? On the other hand, I also see some very interesting technology which is creating a negative impact as well, right? And this is something that is buzzing around in our ecosystem today, in the startup innovation ecosystem, which is decentralization, right? Because decentralization and blockchains are running through minting NFTs. NFTs is like all over the place today, right? And then you have mining the cryptos and so on and so forth, and that is consuming crazy amount of energy today, right? And there's a clear barter of energy for commercial gains, right? Of course, there's a lot of work going on by these consortiums to try and create Ethereum or Polygon or other chains to be more sustainable, right? To create different staking practices that are not so energy consuming. But these energy consuming practices are shaking energy grids across the globe right now, not just one location, but everywhere. And that is causing major problems, right? In the way we're looking at sustainability. So I'm seeing both these kind of trends. There are organizations which are trying to be more positive. There are individuals who are trying to be more positive towards sustainability, but then same individuals are also trying to create this commercial gains by selling NFTs, which is a good thing, but at the cost of mining and minting and using a lot of energy there, right? So I see both the sides there.
And the interesting part is that till about just 4 years back, it would not have occurred to us, or it would have occurred to a very few set of people to say what is the carbon impact of Bitcoin, right? People, it was not in the consideration set. Now all of a sudden we are realizing that when technology scales, right, we can't just look at scale, we've also got to look at the carbon footprint of things. Now we are all talking about moving into a 5G world, right? Everybody is talking about AR and VR. So what is going to happen to all the energy that will be required just for that technology? That is a very big challenging question. And the other side is that, while there are icons of, islands of change that are there, they haven't really scaled. So while we're talking about EVs, the percentage of EVs that is available is really small. And Shilpa was talking about the fact that, we need to own our emissions, and people are doing innovative things in cards for people to understand what their carbon footprint is. But how many people are really doing it? So there is a challenge of one, innovation, and then the second challenge is one of scale. And I think there are many problems in between that need to be solved for us to be truly sustainable. And therefore, perhaps this forum in NASSCOM is perhaps the best place for us to be and to talk about the fact that, there is much more that needs to be done around it. But there's one organization that seems to have solved the scale problem. That is Maersk. Gauri, would you like to weigh in on that?
That would be very positive for us to put it that way, Rana, but we are definitely extremely committed towards that journey. Yes, we are trying to get it solved, and we are aspiring towards coming up with a pretty strong commitment around it. Like Shilpa was pointing out, right? So a lot of organizations together, we agreed on a pact that, okay, 2050 is when we go carbon neutral. Even prior to that, Maersk set out a target saying that every year we cut down our emission by at least a minimum of 5% incrementally. Today, start of this year, we were able to confidently put out our neck in the line saying that, okay, we're going to revise that target and say that we're going to go carbon neutral in 2040, almost a decade in advance, which means that, from the time we made that commitment, we've constantly made strides of efforts towards that. Interesting fact, Namrata, is that you spoke about the amount of EVs, right? There's a stat which often surprises me. About 100 years back, we had 1% of electric cars, it seems. About 100 years back, when cars were just invented. Even today, it is still 1% is the stats, right? So, and it happens that we haven't figured out the the infra that supports any kind of innovation very often, right? And it's not that Maersk was all along that we were always smart about this. We stumbled through multiple barriers when we were trying to go through this journey. For example, when we initially started addressing the sustainability problem, we started by saying that, okay, we're going to contribute to, reducing the food wastage, and we ran a couple of sprints with a lot of startups, and that's when we started our initial investments in the startup landscape as a corporate venture company. And then from there on, we realized that we also need to look at the logistics as the overall business, as an integrator, like how each of these companies, like, retail and banking systems, all of these people are focusing on scope 2 and scope 3 emission impacts. It naturally becomes a responsibility as a logistics partner to ensure that the value chain is kept green all along, right? It is not just about them to ensure it's right, for us also to confirm that as a customer, your value chain remains green across the process. In that reference, we said, okay, we're going to look at autonomous electro trucks. And we made an investment in a company called Enride, which is focusing on that area. And now, after almost 3 years in this journey, we realized that decarbonization does not just come up with the idea of electric ships or ships that run on biofuel. It is also about figuring out how those supply is going to be managed. I don't want to put the exact numbers, but a ship to transport a day, a Panamax vessel to move a day, it costs thousands of gallons of fuel. And today we have a structured supply chain for that to happen on a fossil fuel. We know how to get a bunker diesel to support that. But tomorrow, when I say that I'm going to have a methanol vessel, do I know where to procure those many, millions of gallons that can support my fleet across the globe? And that became a question for us itself. And now today we've put out an order request to Hyundai, where we are manufacturing 8 methanol vessels, biofuel vessels, which operate primarily after realizing how that supply can be managed, how those 8 vessels can be fed as they float in the market. So last year alone, we made 3 different corporate investments on biofuel companies like Vertora, Waste Fuel, Prometheus. These are some large ticket investments trending about $20 million or so, where we made investment just to ensure that we are nurturing the infrastructure that will support a greener transport or logistics in different areas of focus, not just about ship, but also about every other area where we are going to touch about a biofuel or an alternative fuel. You need to ensure that the suppliers are prepped towards that. And that's probably the direction that we are taking in right now. We've also kept our hands full in terms of looking at the ship recycling and how we are able to manage even the employees' footprint in terms of the carbon. So I recently met a startup named Clamader, which is a Danish startup. They go down to the level of measuring your personal impact or carbon emissions as an individual. Very simple habitual changes. You use that app, it tells you, okay, today you managed to create so much impact on the environment. So we are trying to see how those kind of technologies can be brought into our understanding as well. So that's where Maersk is heading into. It is a large, challenging journey, but we are actually making some very good strides towards that. Is how I see it.
Thank you so much, Gauri. Shilpa, I want to understand from your point of view, how can problems be converted into opportunities? Because as you can see, there is a large amount of investments that is going into these startups. Some of them are small, some of them are medium sized, some of them are struggling with the challenges of scale. But yet at the same time, the problems that we see around us don't really seem to be getting solved, right? So we can see the movement, but we can't really see the light.
Absolutely. I guess this is a large challenge at all of our hands, right? At every sector, like I mentioned before. And the fact that there is an ambition and the fact that there is a scope and we are nowhere closer to what we can achieve in 2050 itself is an opportunity. So as Gauri also rightly pointed out, it is not just moving on to electric vehicles, but creating the infrastructure needed. The alternative powertrains that I just mentioned is going to really make a difference. So I was also told that just by moving to electric vehicles does not reduce your carbon footprint, but on the contrary, it increases the carbon footprint of an organization, mainly because the energy source for most of these EVs are still traditional. So how do we counter this problem of making sure that there is a necessary infrastructure that can accompany us in this journey of making sure that we have achieved our net zero alliance, right? So there is this huge gap of the necessary infrastructure that needs to be secured. Also innovations that can happen even in the packaging materials. I have seen the likes of Zomato and Swiggy where they mentioned that they are doing climate conscious delivery. So that doesn't mean that they're actually reducing the carbon footprint in any way, but they've just made sure that for every delivery they go and plant a tree somewhere else, right? So which is, yes, it does lead to carbon neutrality, but in other words, I think this will still not be acceptable in the next few years, because you also have to take certain measures in which you can come up with solutions or alternatives which will impact your direct contribution to sustainability challenges. So with that, I guess a lot of this areas remains to be solved. How can they solve the whole logistic problem? Can they come up with reusable containers for delivery, for instance? This is a problem that nobody has addressed yet. And I also came across a startup in Canada. I guess I forget the name. I think they were called Rebalance. I could be wrong, but yeah. So they also take care of containers that we use, or in our day-to-day life, such as shampoos, conditioner, toothpaste. These are a lot of one-time use packaging. How can we reduce this? Can we also come up with sustainable containers where we can go and just pick up shampoo for the month in a reusable container that I can keep for the next whole year. And there is a logistic partner who can also come and pick up these containers, deliver the containers as per my requirement. So this is a larger problem which is at hand that nobody wants to touch, but this is also an opportunity because somebody has to, somebody has to, bell the cat, right, in the coming few years. And this is definitely an opportunity for every single startup out there who are looking at getting into the sustainability space for sure.
Thank you so much, Shilpa. Abhi, would you like to weigh in for somebody who's actually invested in startups and sustainability? What do you see as the opportunities and the big challenges in finding startups that are actually innovating? And how is it that we can actually build on the innovation ecosystem?
Sure. Thanks, Namrata. And I just wanted to kind of bring this point there that I think Swiggy is doing reusable containers. They're doing a beta with reusable containers, right? So it's not that they're not picked it up. They have picked it up, and it's gradually being rolled out, right? And people are looking at what kind of a carbon footprint are they leaving with that methodology? Because now there's reverse logistics involved as well, right? So every solution is creating some more problems, and that's where design and innovation together can really solve for some of these problems, right? And Shilpa also correctly pointed out about packaging and packaging innovation, right? And these are some of the things that I've been thinking about, or I've been lucky to be part of organizations who have been also doing some of these things. For example, when I was at AB InBev, a couple of things that strike at the top of my mind. One was the packaging innovation, where the packaging around most of the beers made sure that they did not utilize any plastic there, right? So that was very interesting in the way they kind of went about the whole packaging bit, as well as the whole execution or the logistic bit of that as well, right? Second thing that I saw was, and I think by the next 2 years they would hit this target, all the Budweiser breweries across the globe, and Budweiser is probably one of the biggest selling brands in the world today, are all running on solar energy as well as wind energy, right? So a lot of these transformations are happening. Sometimes there's a lot of PR around this, sometimes there's not, right? Sometimes people are still waiting to talk about some of these results till the time they're sure that this is scalable to a certain extent, right? I've also seen at Lowe's, right, we're working on a product ourselves. We're trying to build this product out where we were trying to utilize rice straws as a substrate to grow mycelium and creating a thermal insulation panel. Now, these thermal insulation panels in US, Canada, Europe, everywhere are across every home, right? And, their heat insulation, capacity is very limited or moderate, right? So we're trying to recreate a product in a sustainable way, right? And these rice straws that we were using as substrate are basically burnt in Punjab and Haryana, and they cause a lot of this pollution every year, right? So we were trying to utilize that. the whole product is natural, it is biodegradable. And we were trying to see if this has potentially a stronger heat insulation coefficient, right? Thereby making it a much better product, much more reasonable and biodegradable, right? Which is better for the consumers, right? And both these points, right, from a packaging standpoint to this particular product, there's one thing that links them, which is landfills, right? It's crazy how India has become, or some of these countries, including India, has become one of the biggest landfill problems, landfill dumping grounds for the world, right? And it's a huge problem today that we're trying to deal with, right? And from a corporate standpoint, I've also heard that Amazon has their resales entity whose vision is that there should be no landfills by 2050. So and that is how the resales, whole organization around circular, kind of circular economy there came into Amazon from the e-commerce standpoint. So there's a lot of work going on in different organizations. Not every vision is coming out externally. They're still doing a lot of these pilots and POCs before this innovation hits production, right? And in my opinion, right, we have spoken about this in this conversation as well as the previous panel as well, about reporting and benchmarking. And I think this is super important for organizations, because it is not just a luxury that they have to participate in that and look good in front of the consumers or investors, but it's the need of the hour, right? So they have to mandatorily report these KPIs across across these consortiums or symposiums, etc., so that they're tracked effectively, right? And they're supposed to be charged if they are not doing it right? And the same thing happens with individuals as well. I mentioned this earlier as well. As individuals, we're making a lot of conscious decisions today, but then how do we get ourselves to be motivated to take more conscious decisions, right? Can we create those kind of mechanisms in place which makes us more motivated to go green, to be more sustainable in our daily choices?
How can that happen? Because people only do things when they think that it drives value for them or their organization, right? And tell me.
No, I was just saying that the value creation is all about having the value creation in your head, right? Sometimes it's not even tangible. It's about when you look at gaming, right? And you're talking about scoring, right? People want to compete and be on top of the game, right? Because you have earned virtual currency, which means nothing in the real world, or maybe it may mean in the future in metaverse, but right now it means nothing. So
Right.
but people still want to compete and be there on top, right? And that's where some kind of mechanism to motivate folks at an individual level could be created, and that's definitely a challenge that people should solve for.
Thank you so much, Abhay. I want to call on everybody to give their closing remarks. We need to end soon. So, Gauri, first you, then Shilpa, and then back to you, Abhay. If you can just, conclude, give your concluding thoughts on the topic, that would be really nice. Gauri, over to you.
Thanks for that, Namrata. I think the panel clearly highlighted how this issue is being dealt with right now, right? So, and one key call out that I would probably specify here is that very often that we see innovation as a side gig, or whenever the moment you hear design and innovation from a large corporate, we always see it as a team of 10 members sitting in a corner trying to solve something, which is probably never meant to solve immediately. It'll happen in about a decade's time. I think that scene has to change significantly when you're trying to bring up problems like sustainability on your front face, right? And adoption at scale is a huge importance to the whole thing, right? Yes, there are amazing pilots. A lot of times, for example, we did see a lot of good innovations in packaging that we keep seeing as internet videos, right? And we would be amused to say that sooner or later this is going to come to me in my own package at my home, which is not going to happen very soon because the adoption is not happening at scale. So if we are able to push these two items, saying that, okay, design innovation takes a front seat whenever it comes to delivering path-breaking solutions, it is not just about a side gig, and bringing in adoption and scale is going to be a huge differentiator for us to take this ahead. So that's my 2 cents in this whole topic here.
Thank you so much. Shilpa, over to you.
Thanks. So I guess my closing comments would be, change has to begin with us as an individual, us as an employee, and then it sort of also, translates into the organization's goals as well. So at least in SocGen, CSR is one of the core, objective areas for all the employees across the group. And, one of the mandate is CSR is in our DNA. And we have to make those, conscious choice where, we have to reduce the carbon footprint as an employee, as an individual, make those, choices. Sometimes it's tough. Maybe, just go hyper local, commute less, make sure that, instead of sending heavy attachments, for instance, in your day-to-day work, you can start using OneDrive as, a practice. These are small changes, but has a significant impact on the organization as well as the overall environment, right? So I guess the change definitely, is with us, and we have to start looking at this as a personal problem rather than an organization's problem.
Thank you so much. So Gauri talked about the fact that, we need to get the timeline closer to us rather than some far point in the future. Shilpa, you talked about the fact that we need to take ownership and the change begins with us. Abhay, what do you think?
I think I agree with both the points. I think I maybe just able to add the same point that I said earlier as well. That when you look at plastic ban, right, this was not necessarily motivating to all individuals, but individuals were fined if they did not comply with that ban, right? So you have to figure out strategies, from a short-term standpoint, which includes compliance, very strict compliance, be it organizations or be it individuals. But the long-term solution for innovating in this space is not just compliance, it's actually about motivation. So I think the bigger challenge right now would be how do we motivate enough or expose people enough to the problems that are being created without them knowing about the problems that the globe is facing today, or all of us are facing today. If we can expose them and motivate them to solve for this, then the individual change that Shilpa spoke about will these drops will make the ocean, right? So that's the change that I'm talking about from a long-term standpoint.
Very well said, Abhay. Thank you so much. And on that note, I'd like to conclude this session. It's been my pleasure to be here with you today, and I've learned a lot from all of you. And I'm sure so has the audience. Thanks a ton. Sadvika, over to you. Bye.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. And thank you so much to the panel for that eye-opening session. Yes, definitely sustainability is not black or white, and it's essential to innovate and come up with what works best for each individual business given their value chain, their strengths, weaknesses, and using innovation and scalability. And it's also crucial to note that sustainability is not just an elaborate show of social responsibility, but can also provide financial benefits and help create industry leaders, provided it is approached in the right way. So thank you, panelists. And we have reached the end of today's session on ESG, sustainability the savvy way. I personally have learned a great deal today, and it's been an incredible opportunity listening to such significant leaders of their field talk about sustainability. I can't wait to see what the forthcoming decade of action would bring with such influential people at the helm. I sincerely hope that you, dear audience, have had an equally enriching experience. Thank you so much and good evening.